There are three types of madmen you will encounter on the battlefield. Those who have completely lost their minds and are merely seeking death. Those consumed by hatred, no longer seeing anything else around them. And then Ian, the young man full of mystery at that moment, began to read out incredibly strange words. Seeing this, Mason exclaimed in confusion, What is he muttering? Logan, standing nearby, suddenly grew annoyed and shouted, Get away! Get away now! I told you to get away. However, Ian didn't pay much attention and continued on. Logan immediately raised his crossbow with a face full of resentment, muttering grumpily, That bastard! Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, Ian tore the scroll he was holding in his hand into two. All of a sudden, a beam of light descended from the sky. Both Mason and Logan shouted in unison, What is that? Lightning. A bolt of lightning struck directly into their area. Both Logan and Mason were sent flying by that bolt of lightning. Both screamed in pain, Help! Charging forward without armor or shield. Ancient Secret is curious about your true identity, a crazy mage. Ancient Secret is curious about your true identity, a crazy mage. Suddenly, a truck rushed right in front of Ian, dead instantly. Ian thought to himself, Life is truly a dog's life. Just when I thought my university life was finally about to begin. Unexpectedly, I died like a dog in a place like this. Yet when I opened my eyes, I had been reincarnated as Ian, the son of a farmer. At this moment, his father and mother cried out in astonishment, Unbelievable! Black hair? My family, farmers in the lonely empire, were struggling as my parents and two older brothers were all out working. When my parents and two older brothers were away working, my little sister and I could only wander around all day looking for food. Standing not far away, a few other children shouted to mock him, A crow, how gross. Ian, who was sitting and eating grilled fish, glanced at the group of children and couldn't help but fall in a deep thought. I didn't want to be born with black hair either, you lot. Damn Middle Ages. I've already been reincarnated, yet I still have to live in such poverty. Suddenly, something appeared that caught his attention. Is this my status board? On the board, it displayed the information. Ian Raven. The system reported that you are unknown. Hearing that, he stood frozen, able only to lament his own fate. Damn, even if a status board appears, I can't do anything. Even if I toil away every day, it will still be a life of debt where I gain nothing. Inheriting that life from my parents, I don't even dare to dream of any profession other than farming. I don't have the opportunity to learn anything else either. I believe that if I were given an education, I could do well at anything. I wonder if there's any place that would even take me. However, Ian's train of thought was interrupted by Min's wide-eyed gaze. She looked at him and pointed to the small, drooling mouth on her own face. After that, she excitedly told him, Let's go get dessert. He also enthusiastically went along with it. All right, let's go. A while later, in another area of the forest, Ian instructed Min, Don't go too far. Minson nodded slightly, then focused on savoring the dessert fruits. He looked at her and smiled, thinking it felt like he had just taught her how to eat dessert not long ago. She's growing up so fast. Just then, a noise from nearby drew Ian's attention. He observed a large dark shape hiding in the bushes nearby. Ian approached to get a better look, and immediately after, he screamed in shock when he realized what it was. It was a massive bear that had suddenly appeared with two blood-red eyes. It roared loudly in front of Ian and Min. In an instant, it reached out with sharp claws aimed straight at them. Ian quickly hugged Min tightly to his chest. He quickly retreated in fear. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning from nowhere struck the bear directly. He quickly retreated in fear. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning from nowhere struck the bear directly. Finally, it collapsed to the ground in front of the two children. At that moment, Ian heard a person's voice. Ian was a bit wary of the person in front of him and stammered, Yes, that's right. But in his head, he thought, Did this person take down that bear? Who is she? The stranger introduced herself. I am Arides, a traveling mage. Ian exclaimed in admiration. A mage. They are powerful entities that appear on the battlefield, utilizing exquisite skills with astonishing destructive power. Why would someone like that be in such a remote town? Arides spoke up. I am looking for a black-haired boy living in this town. Is there anyone else with black hair besides you? Ian immediately replied, No, just me. She looked him over and said, Well then, It seems I've found the right person. Ian felt suspicious in his heart. He looked at her and asked back, me? At this time, Arides recalled the words of someone who once said, find a black-haired boy in the Feldenberg territory. If you take him on as an apprentice, good things will happen. And then she thought to herself, his eyes are full of curiosity mixed with fear, being both lively and cute. So that's all it takes to take this child on as an apprentice? Thinking this, Arides laughed loudly and said, honestly, that's Space Mage. Ian frowned and thought, I heard that mages are all scary eccentrics, but this person is actually very kind. The magic just now was truly powerful. She had destroyed the bear with just one blow. Seeing this, he directly asked Arides, Mage, may I ask a question? She replied, what is it? He asked about the magic she had used on the bear just moments ago. Arides stepped closer to him. She pondered for a moment, then excitedly said, it seems you have an interest in magic. He replied, I once heard that magic was very scary, but seeing it in person, it feels truly miraculous. Arides quickly responded, there is nothing special about it. As long as you learn, you can do it easily too. After all, anyone can master magic. Hearing this, Ian's cheeks slowly flushed red. He bashfully muttered, if anyone can do it, does that mean I can learn magic too? Arides revealed a bright smile. She looked straight into Ian's eyes, then reached out to pat his head, saying, of course, as long as you meet a good master, it is entirely possible. You can also become a mage, Ian. If you want, I can teach you magic. As she spoke, Arides reached her hand toward Ian. How about it? Do you want to become my apprentice? Ian looked at the person in front of him. He couldn't help but ponder. This could be the opportunity to change his life. Ian looked at the person in front of him. He couldn't help but ponder. This could be the opportunity to change his life. He decisively grabbed Arides' hand and stated clearly, yes, I look forward to your guidance. The next day, morning in Ian's village. Suddenly, a large book slammed onto the table right in front of Ian. Arides raised her voice to remind him. The most fundamental basics of magic lie in the Meronius language. Before that, Raven had told both Arides and Ian, I understand, be careful, have a safe trip. Even the local lord nodded in approval. Good, think about it. Arides breathed a sigh of relief and exclaimed, it was difficult to get permission from his parents and the lord. You must give it your best effort. Ian slammed his hand onto the table, stating clearly, I am ready. She asked him once more, all right, shall we start? He immediately answered, yes. Meronius language 1% in progress. Meronius language 27% in progress. At this moment, Ian had gradually begun to babble a few words. Meronius language 53% in progress. By then, Ian had read quite a lot of books. He also gradually pronounced the language more fluently than before. Later, the system notified that Meronius language was 99% in progress. Finally, Meronius language 100% complete. He could proficiently use the official magic language of the great mages. 7 years later, Ian gently closed the book. Arides stood by and smiled, saying to him, theory lessons are finished. Let's move to the next step. Ian was now more mature. He smiled and replied to her, yes. Ian Arides Raven, novice mage, magic language skill, can use magic language. A while later, in a place of majestic mountains and endless clouds, Ian suddenly fell freely from the sky. He screamed continuously and loudly, hey master, you're moving too fast. For the last 6 years, I've only been studying the Meronius language. Under the bright summer afternoon sun, Ian's childish voice echoed, help. Seeing this, Arides shouted to instruct him, listen to the sounds. Ian awkwardly stammered. He looked around once and thought to himself, what am I supposed to hear in this place? I only hear the sound of the wind. Suddenly, he heard several voices in his ears. He is a human. He is flying. He's just like us, right? Ian thought in admiration that this was the Meronius language. The system at that moment showed that he had received a new skill, wind magic skill, and could use wind magic. A few hours later, Ian's curious voice rang out, the mysteries of nature. Arides smiled slightly and replied, that's right. You look really funny right now. He helplessly replied, yes, yes, feel free to laugh. Arides continued to instruct, mages communicate with the mysteries of nature to borrow their power. That is magic. Ian looked serious and muttered, "Magic." And then Arides shouted loudly, "Now that you can hear the sound of the wind, next you must listen to other mysterious sounds." Ian excitedly responded, "Yes, leave it to me." Arides shouted, "First is water magic." In an instant, Ian was pushed into the sea. He had to struggle in the water while a curse echoed in his ears. "You're dirtying the water. Get out of here quickly." He really wanted to argue back, but couldn't form words, only emitting sounds. A silent exchange. After finishing, Arides instructed him further. Next is ice magic. Amidst the cold weather and falling snow, Ian sat huddled in a barrel to endure the cold, while a voice echoed in his ears, "Human, your body is getting cold." As soon as he mastered the next power, Arides opened her mouth to praise Ian. "Not bad. Ian, your ability to grasp them is quick, to the point where I have no more words to respond." Then she snapped her fingers and shouted, "All right." Next is, suddenly, a large flame erupted in front of Ian. He panicked and shouted, "Master!" The flame saw him and surprisingly shouted, "What is this? Is there a human here? I wonder if burning him would be okay." Ian heard this and couldn't help but scream in terror, "Help!" In a blink of an eye, the scene shifted to inside a dark cave. Ian held a torch in his hand and sighed wearily, complaining, "Earth magic. Is this the last one?" The cave then said, "Therefore, that which is flowing cannot be called flowing just because it is not moving." Ian didn't seem to understand and dejectedly said, "What is it talking about? What kind of cosmic theory is that? Perhaps I have no talent for earth magic, or I need to accumulate more experience from other training sessions." Suddenly, Ian saw the system and startled, shouting, "Oh, it's the skill board." On it appeared text about a skill point bonus, which could be used to increase magic proficiency. Points available, 100. Ian revealed a cunning smile. He muttered, "As expected, I really am a cheater in this world. In that case, let's upgrade earth magic, because I don't understand what it's saying at all." Immediately, the system flashed a beam of light right in front of Ian. The cave spoke, "Little human, beneath this place lava is flowing. Be careful. If an earthquake occurs, it will erupt outside." Ian said softly, "So this is earth magic. All right. I must leave here quickly and tell the master that I've heard the sound of the earth." Fire burned. In an instant, the torch in Ian's hand flared brightly. However, at that moment, another voice emerged that caught his attention. "I hate light." Ian panicked, looked around, and shouted, "Who is that? Is it the earth?" The person replied to him, "No, I am darkness." Night, the moon had risen to its peak, and the clouds drifted slowly by. Arides sat at the cave entrance, deep in thought, telling herself she had to attend the upcoming Fire Mage conference. Suddenly, Ian ran out of the cave, running while screaming loudly, "Master!" Arides looked him over, jumped down from the cliff, and called out, "You succeeded." Ian obediently replied, "Yes, I even learned shadow magic from the darkness." Arides was stunned for a moment. "What?" She thought in her heart. "Are you saying you were brave enough to hear the sound of darkness?" Ian observed that she was just looking at him without saying anything else, and he hurriedly asked, Master, are you okay?" Arides replied, "Ian, yes, it's time for us to come down from the mountain." Ian nodded and replied, "Yes, where are we going?" However, Arides said, "That's not what I meant. What I mean is we should part ways here. Go to Chronolic and attend the Space-Time Mage Conference. If you truly have the destiny to master space-time magic, you will meet the Space-Time Mage there." Ian questioned why it had to be space-time magic all of a sudden. Even so, Arides only laughed loudly and patted his head without saying anything. She smiled and thought, Ian has a natural talent for mysteries. If my intuition is right, Ian can certainly master the power of time as well. In that case, let's meet again in 3 years in Dranham. A few days later, melodic calls echoed in the middle of the late afternoon in a certain village. A few days later, melodic calls echoed in the middle of the late afternoon in a certain village. Ian moved through the crowd of people passing by, thinking as he walked. The Space-Time Mage Conference. She really is an unpredictable person. Everything happened so suddenly. In front of him, a man loudly offered, "Anyone going north want to come with me?" Ian thought to himself, she did say the Space-Time Mage Conference was held in the north. Anyway, I'm free, so I might as well try going there and see. Ian and a group of people sat huddled around a campfire to rest. Reek, beside him, turned his head with a face full of curiosity. "Hey kid, is this your first time going north?" Reek, beside him, turned his head with a face full of curiosity. "Hey kid, is this your first time going north?" Ian thought of that dragon illusion and asked doubtfully, "Dragon Mountain." Afterwards, Reek acted friendly, draped his arm over Ian's shoulder, and asked, "Do you know how to fight? Or at least, can you run fast?" He furrowed his brows in embarrassment. "I'm not very confident about either." He's acting too friendly all of a sudden. Hearing that, the man immediately withdrew his hand and questioned uncomfortably, "What? Really? How useless? What is your profession?" Ian scratched his head and bashfully replied, "I'm a mage." Reek stood up, horrified, and backed away a long distance. "A mage? What did you say?" He couldn't believe it and hurriedly confirmed, "Is that for real?" He pressed his lips together and affirmed, "Yes." Lucy, startled and glanced to the side to probe. Calf, who was holding a water bowl in his hand, gasped in shock. "A mage?" Ogan also shouted with a face full of surprise. Ian saw this and doubtfully asked, "Is there a problem?" He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, "What is this atmosphere?" Reek quickly snatched the water bowl from his hand and said ingratiatingly, Nothing. Let me get you some more." He stared wide-eyed and stammered, "No, I'm fine." Ian looked blankly at his back as he hugged the bowl and ran off, shouting, "Here." He suddenly stopped when he heard a mocking sound behind him. "That thing is a mage." Ogan laughed coldly, looking contemptuous and ridiculous. Caleb also laughed and chimed in, "He looks so weak." Rian curled his lip and raised a hand noisily. "If so, then the stray dogs around here are all mages." Ian looked at the group, confused. What's wrong with them? Right after that, Lucy walked to his side and spoke softly. She raised her hand and whispered, "If you are truly a mage, you should teach them a lesson to make them shut up." Ian frowned in confusion. "Teach them a lesson?" Lucy immediately sat down beside him and explained, "Whether you are a mage or something else doesn't matter, because mercenaries will look down on anyone who looks gentle." She looked at Owen's group and added, "Therefore, you must show your strength to scare them for a bit." Lucy tilted her head to look at him and sincerely reminded him, "If you do that, then if anything happens, they might return to protect." Ian started in surprise and looked at her, saying nothing. After a while, he looked forward and thought, "She's right, but how should I do it? I've never really been truly angry before." Nearby, Diane spat into the bowl he had just received with a look of contempt. Next, he used a leaf to gently wipe around the rim of the bowl. Ian saw this scene and was so angry that his veins popped out. Did he just spit into my plate? While holding the bowl and feeling the ground under his feet tremble, he panicked and shouted, "What is that? An earthquake?" Suddenly, he looked up blankly when he heard Ian's voice. Ian stood straight in front of Dan with a dark face, questioning him word by word. "Why did you dare to spit on my plate?" He was so panicked that he couldn't help but tremble all over. "I am sorry." He knelt down on the ground, not daring to raise his head, and begged, "I'm sorry, Master Mage." Ian rolled his eyes in anger when he heard the explanation. "I just thought I should wipe the plate clean." He widened his eyes and put his hands on his hips, shouting, "Then you should wash it with water." He stopped when he heard that and asked in a low voice, "But isn't water dirty?" Ian asked back in shock, "What did you say?" He frowned and thought about those rivers, saying they were full of mud and parasites. How could I possibly use water to wash the plate? Hearing that, his jaw dropped in such shock that he almost lost his mind when told that saliva was much more hygienic. Looking at the bewildered faces of the group, he thought to himself, "I can't believe it." His whole body stiffened, and he stood motionless. The hygienic standards of the Middle Ages are truly astonishing. Lucy cautiously approached, reached out to touch Ian lightly, and called out, "Master Mage." Next, he curled his lips slightly, quickly chanted a spell, and streams of bright red light rapidly entered the nearby burning campfire. The group, seeing the flames shoot straight up, stared in surprise. The whole group stared at the fire, making sounds of disbelief. What? Lucy, nearby, also stared blankly at the fire. Ian stood motionless, remaining in place as he ordered, Go get me some water immediately." Then, unable to hold it in any longer, he raised both arms high and roared, "You filthy, medieval people!" Diane immediately turned and ran away quickly. "I don't know what's going on, but it seems he's gone crazy." Then, unable to hold it in any longer, he raised both arms high and roared, "You filthy, medieval people!" Diane immediately turned and ran away quickly. "I don't know what's going on, but it seems he's gone crazy." Owen led the group forward and asked, "Did Kathy really go this way?" Sepp, standing next to him, smiled and said, "That's right." He wore a big smile, imagining the two of them together. "Good. This time I'll keep Kathy all to myself." Owen looked up at a black silhouette in the distance and shouted loudly. Seeing it, he blushed, raised his hand, and yelled, "Hey, it's dark out, come with me." Right after that, his brows furrowed tightly as he looked over. He saw a stranger carrying Lucy on his shoulder and let out an exclamation. Owen immediately shouted loudly, "What? Who are you?" Suddenly, an arrow flew from the opposite direction, piercing Caleb's chest beside him. Ogen, seeing him fall, angrily cursed, "You bastards, how dare you do that to our man?" He drew his sword and led the group behind him to charge and kill them. The masked man, seeing this, frowned and said with contempt, "These weaklings look like nothing." Suddenly, Lucy, who was lying on the man's shoulder, opened her eyes wide. Then she bit down hard on the masked man's shoulder, making him cry out in pain. The masked man let go, threw Lucy hard to the ground, and grabbed his wound tight. Shaking all over, she immediately stood up and quickly ran away. Shaking all over, she immediately stood up and quickly ran away. Inside the tent, Ian rested on his elbows and thought. His brows were tightly furrowed, and he muttered incessantly, "Saliva is absolutely out of the question." Suddenly, Ian was startled and sat bolt upright when he heard a voice calling out, "Humans are humans. Humans are coming. Wake up quickly." Ian sat quietly on the bed, his face full of confusion. What is this? Sensing this energy, he glanced over when he heard a call from outside. Master Mage. Reek, full of worry, lifted the curtain and shouted, "It's bad." At night, the bright full moon illuminated the entire forest. Ian stepped out of the tent and saw the group fighting fiercely. The masked man swung his blade, easily finishing off an opposing soldier. He stepped on a man's corpse and shouted an order, "I don't care, kill them all." The masked man raised his sword high and added, looking at the crowd around him, "Find that woman." Lucy gripped her bag strapped tightly and hid behind a nearby tree. She fearfully hugged her head and sat down, worried. What should I do? If it goes on like this, I'll be captured. Suddenly, Lucy was startled when she felt a sword tip pointing straight at her head. The tall, burly Victor looked down and said coldly, "So there you are." He curled his lips slightly and shouted fiercely, "Stand up now, or I'll cut off your hand." Lucy's face turned pale, and her whole body trembled with fear. It's over. Right after that, Victor, seeing she wasn't moving, raised the sword in his hand high. Suddenly, he widened his eyes, looking back in shock. A powerful wave of energy surged from afar, knocking Victor flying backward. Not far away, Ian raised his hand, with magic surrounding him that hadn't yet dissipated. Lucy immediately looked up at him. Ian reached out, quickly grabbed her hand, and pulled her up. He smiled slightly, looking over, and gently reminded her, "Stay close and follow me." Lucy stared blankly, pursing her lips without saying a word. A group of people formed a line, hands placed on the shoulders of the person in front. Reek, at the end of the line, raised an arm and shouted, "The Master Mage is ready." Reek, at the end of the line, raised an arm and shouted, "The Master Mage is ready." His lips moved slightly, and he began to chant, "Oh, darkness." His lips moved slightly, and he began to chant, "Oh, darkness." Ian raised a hand, and streams of black mist and blue light quickly gathered. Seeing the black mist appear beside him, he exclaimed in shock, "What is this? Is this entire place covered in darkness?" Piercing screams rang out. "I can't see anything, damn it. Light the torches." Torches were quickly lit. In that dark night, screams continued to echo. "It's so hot here, it's me. Then it's this side. I told you it wasn't." In the darkness, Ian led the Reek group forward. "Good. If we keep going like this." Suddenly, a system board appeared. Skill activated, cast dark vision. Can see in the dark. Suddenly, a loud shout echoed in the darkness. Aeon appeared behind Reek with a torch shouting, "Over here!" He immediately raised his sword high. "Where do you think you're going?" Reek, face full of terror, trembled like a leaf. "Spare me." Ian, in front, turned to look back, his eyes flashing with blue light. Oh, burning fire! Along with screams, flames from the torch erupted, covering Aeon complete. In the blink of an eye, the man, covered in burns, fell to the ground. The remaining people, seeing this, froze in place, shocked and motionless. Ian gritted his teeth and stared over. That should scare them into running away. Immediately after, terrified cries rang out. "It's a mage! There's a mage there!" The masked man, seeing this, raised his sword and led the charge forward. Everyone rushed in. Suddenly, Ian looked to the side, his face full of panic. Something like a draker, eyes glowing red, rushed in from the right with its mouth wide open. Ian's group stiffened in place, not daring to move. Andrian was also paralyzed with fear, still not daring to budge. Ian also opened his mouth wide, staring blankly. That is, he looked at the draker's glowing eyes and thought, "A drake." The masked man saw Ian's fresh blood flowing from the creature's mouth and let out a wail. Immediately after, he turned and ran away. Reek pointed his hand in that direction, his voice trembling. "Master Mage, there's a dragon." Ian looked at the draker and lamented in his heart. "This is bad." Ian looked at the draker and lamented in his heart. "This is bad." The system's sound echoed. "You have witnessed the primordial mystery." Ian looked at the notification board in front of him, making a sound of confusion. The notification screen continued to appear. "Receive summoning skill. Can communicate with and summon mysterious creatures." Ian looked at the draker in front of him and wondered, summoning. His brows furrowed in speculation. Don't tell me even that, Drake. Ian thought back to his past and pondered. Are these like the mysteries I've encountered before? He gripped his trembling fist tightly. If so, the draker heard Ian's call and tilted its head slightly. Oh, Drake. Reek and the others also stared at him in horror. Master Mage. The draker opened its mouth wide. Eyes narrowed slightly as it stared at Ian. He remained calm, constantly comforting himself. It's okay. I can do it. Streams of blue light flashed from Ian's body. Because the mystery has never betrayed me. He reached out and slapped his chest, shouting, I am. Right after, Ian raised a finger and pointed at the draker, adding, your friend. Right after, Ian raised a finger and pointed at the draker, adding, your friend. Right after, Ian raised a finger and pointed at the draker, adding, your friend. Du looked on anxiously, whispering, I don't know what he's saying. Reek frowned and put a finger to his lips. Quiet. The Master Mage is listening. Ian stared at the draker in front of him, motionless, while inside he was frantically holding his head and wailing. What is it saying? Finally, Ian was determined. There's no other way. Use points to level up the skill. He lightly tapped the system screen. I'll put it all into summoning. Immediately, a notification line popped up. Summoning ability has increased. The draker's low voice echoed. Ian widened his eyes in surprise. I heard it. He immediately looked up and called out, Lord Drake. It roared, and then the draker opened its mouth wide and shouted, nearly blowing Ian's group away. If you have something to say, speak. His lips curled slightly, and he thought, sure enough, this method works. Right after, Ian reached out and bit his nails slightly. After a while, his voice rang out, Lord Drake, I have no intention of fighting you. The draker heard this and replied with contempt. A tiny human wanting to fight me? How ridiculous. Ian didn't pay any mind and continued. That's true. We would certainly be killed in an instant. To an entity like you, Lord Drake, we aren't even worth your concern. He heard this and suspiciously asked back, Are you asking me to spare your lives? Reek behind him anxiously asked, Telepathy? Du's face was green. I don't know. Lucy gritted her teeth and looked over there anxiously. Exactly. I'm even too lazy to kill you. Ian heard this and couldn't hide his joy. All right, that seems okay. But he suddenly stopped when he heard him interrupt. However, the draker's eyes flashed with white light and it roared. My mood is currently terrible. Reek trembled all over and looked up, shouting, Master Mage! Ian, seeing this, also gritted his teeth and cursed silently. Damn it. What should I do? Ian looked at the draker and thought to himself. So he's telling me to get out of his sight. No other way. have to fight directly. Right after, he looked at him and shouted, "Drake!" Ian stood still, held a hand out, and asked, "Why is your mood so bad?" The Draker replied with full contempt, "Why should I talk about that with a human?" He calmly heard his voice reply, "I just thought maybe I could help with something." The Draker rose and raised a claw forward. So arrogant. What can a tiny human do? Right after, Ian bowed his head and let out a loud roar. Streams of energy from the sky and surrounding lakes quickly shot high up. Lucy's group behind felt the energy gathering and gasped in astonishment. The Draker also sensed the magic in the air and let out a cry of suspicion. On the other side, streams of white magic swirled around Ian. He saw this, opened his mouth wide, and let out an exclamation of interest. Ian opened his eyes to look at the streams of light around him and smiled, replying, "I am just an ordinary mage, searching for the mysteries of the world, so I hope to offer my humble efforts to help." Ian opened his eyes to look at the streams of light around him and smiled, replying, "I am just an ordinary mage, searching for the mysteries of the world, so I hope to offer my humble efforts to help." A long while later, his voice echoed in response, "Fine. From here on out, negotiations begin." Inside the quiet forest, Ian looked at the Draker in front and thought, his killing intent has vanished. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and secretly sighed in relief. At least he escaped the immediate danger. Now it's time to show his skills. Ian closed his eyes and touched his chin in thought. Anyway, it's not like I can't survive, but I can't let him lead me by the nose with strange requests. Suddenly, he widened his eyes in surprise as he remembered that questioning voice. "Do you understand?" Ian, Arides had her hands on her hips and gently instructed, "You cannot use magic if you cannot communicate with the mystery." Ian tilted his head in confusion when he heard her add, "Therefore, the relationship you build with them is extremely important." Arides' voice echoed to add, "As a friend or as a subordinate. Every mystery has a different personality. For a mage, the essential thing is to understand and empathize with the feelings of the mystery." Back to reality, the corners of Ian's lips curled up. That's right, for a mage, the most important thing is communication techniques. All right, let's see how I handle this Drake. He glanced to the side, manifest skill board. Right after, Ian shouted in surprise when he saw the advanced summoning technique board by Demon. Unlike his calm appearance, inside he was so excited he could jump for joy. This is exactly it. Ian stared at the screen to watch. On the screen was the text. No matter what, just give them the strongest type of alcohol. The larger the body, the stronger the alcohol must be. He couldn't help but wonder, what? Alcohol. Next, the text on the screen continued to flash. Ian then thought nervously. The screen popped up another reminder line. Flatter as much as you can. He stood frozen, foolishly asking back, "What the hell is that?" Ian knelt on the ground and thought desperately, "It's not good. A loner like me will absolutely not be able to do this." The Draker felt this and asked suspiciously, "What is a loner?" He immediately looked up, full of determination. "No. First I must win the Drake's favor. If I can do that, there will be a breakthrough." The Draker saw Ian hesitating and asked, "First, what is it?" He spoke with a sincere face. "I have prepared a gift for you." "Drake, may I offer it to you?" He looked down from above. "A gift? All right, bring it here." Ian didn't look back and shouted, "Reek!" He was startled and immediately replied, "Yes." He turned to look back and urged loudly, "Hurry to the cart and bring the strongest liquor over quick." Just a moment later, a row of colorful strong liquors was laid out. The Draker bowed its head to look down, full of dissatisfaction. What kind of stingy gift is this? Ian closed his eyes and added softly, "In the human world, the smaller the quantity, the more expensive it is." He couldn't help but raise a fist and sighed. "What are you complaining about?" Right after, he quickly poured a cup of liquor into a large glass. Ian held the newly poured glass of liquor and held it toward the Draker. "Here." It smelled the liquor rising and covered its nose with a claw. "What is this smell?" The Draker looked down from above and emitted an intense pressure, asking, "Mage, you're not trying to play any tricks, are you?" Ian, seeing this, gave a gentle smile. "Not at all." "Then I will drink first to prove it." He raised a glass of liquor, then tilted his head and drank it all. Reek's group behind watched anxiously toward this side. After drinking, Ian wiped the corner of his mouth and smiled. See? Absolutely no problem. He couldn't help but dry heave and think, this stuff is really strong. The Draker covered its nose with 2 fingers. I see. The smell is strong. But it bowed its head toward the glass of liquor, hearing Ian's voice ring in its ear. Please try a sip. I believe you'll be satisfied. The Draker used a claw to gently lift the glass of liquor to admire it, then stuck its tongue out and licked it to test. Julian watched anxiously, clasping his hands before his chest and praying silently. On the other side, the Draker drank the entire glass of liquor, its face flushed red. Ian looked at the other side and asked, "How is it?" Its voice echoed in response, "Not exactly delicious." He heard the Draker's following words and widened his eyes, but for some reason, it's very easy to get addicted. Ian, full of joy, picked up another bottle of liquor. "Please have some more. From here on, it will be even better." The Draker asked uncertainly, "Is that so?" Inside the darkness, the bright full moon still illuminated the entire forest. The Draker, face flushed red, held the glass of liquor it had just finished. Beside it, Ian used a handkerchief to wipe the sweat on his forehead, hearing it shout loudly, "You call this liquid alcohol? I like it." He looked at the pile of empty wooden barrels in front, worried. He had drunk more than 7 barrels and still hadn't collapsed. Ian, face completely deadpan, raised his thumb high. This guy's tolerance is truly terrifying, truly admirable. He bowed his head and lightly sipped a mouthful of liquor in his hand. I intended to take advantage of his sleep to run away, but it looks like that's not possible. Suddenly, Ian widened his eyes when he heard the Draker ask, "Human, you asked me just now, right?" It bowed its head calmly and called out, "Why is my mood bad?" He immediately continued, "Yes." Ian looked at the Draker's teary eyes and was startled. Why did he suddenly become so sentimental? In the darkness, its sad voice echoed, "My den is in a bad location, and it's more cramped than others." The Draker looked up and cried loudly. Even so, she still said it was a comfortable place. Ian was petrified on the spot, using a judgmental gaze to look over. Is that so? He wondered silently. He has a lover? With that face, he bowed his head and added in a low voice, "But I don't know since when." The Draker's voice of loss continued, startling him. She started being mocked by others. Its whole body trembled, and it gritted its teeth tightly. Just because she was around someone like me, I felt extremely guilty toward her. The Draker's eyes flashed with yellow light. It looked up at the sky and roared loudly. So I myself said goodbye. On the other side, the Reek group was sleeping and was startled awake. What? The Draker looked up at the sky and didn't stop wailing. 3 people, Reek, simultaneously clasped their hands to their chests and fell down. Ian looked up at him and pondered. The affection he has for his loved one is no different from a human's. Naturally, I feel a bit of pity for him. He touched his chin and calculated, "Wait, if I take advantage of this." The Draker heard Ian's call and looked over with tears. "Drake." He stood up with one hand on his knee. "I will use magic to help you fix your nest." He was startled to look over and asked, "What? You will?" The corners of Ian's lips curled up, and he smiled, continuing, "That's right, but in exchange." He stood with both hands on his hips, his face full of smiles. "Can you grant me one request?" The next morning, the light gradually illuminated the towering cliff walls. Ian stood up straight, his face calm. Reek was leaning against the back of the carriage, muttering in his sleep, "Yes, I miss you too." Ian reached out and placed a finger on his forehead. "Sorry." As he slept, Reek pursed his lips and shouted. Seeing this, Ian became incredibly irritated, veins threatening to pop. Ian leaned in close and said coldly, "If you don't wake up, I'm going to break your fingers." Reek was filled with terror as he saw the boy staring at him with a dead serious face. He immediately scrambled backward in a panic, letting out a loud scream. The carriage lost its balance, causing Reek and the others inside to fall out. He and the others sat up instantly, casting their eyes around. Unable to hide his suspicion, Reek asked, "Mage, what on earth is going on?" Ian replied with a calm face, "I vaguely remember Drake letting out a roar." Upon hearing that, the man continued, and then everyone passed out. Ian cursed under his breath. "Damn it, I shouldn't have picked them up." Lucy looked over and asked anxiously, "Has Drake returned to its nest?" Ian denied it. "No, it's waiting up ahead." Reek clung tightly to Julian beside him. Is it going to eat us? The boy replied with a serious face. No. Ian bowed his head to look at the group. It's waiting for me. I made a deal with it on the condition that it would help you. Lucy frowned, repeating uncertainly. A deal? Reek cried out with a moved expression. Mage, sacrificing yourself for our sake. Ian furrowed his brows and turned away. I think I might have done something unnecessary. He couldn't help but think of the scene from last night. He had told it to release these people in exchange for him fixing its nest. Behind him, Reek pointed a finger straight up. Grand Mage Raven Arides Ian. Julian also shouted loudly. Raven Arides Ian. Hearing the calls, the boy turned his head in surprise. What is it? Immediately after, a song of praise for the super cool master Ian began. Defeating Drake, roaring, defeating it. The voices of the three continued to ring out. So cool. Tell Drake off. Awesome, scold it, they shouted excitedly. And in the end, you made Drake submit. Reek and the others, eyes full of tears, raised their fists and yelled, Submit. He immediately stepped forward and shouted loudly. From today on, we live and die with the mage. We will give our lives to protect you. Andrian from behind immediately chimed in. All of us. Ian looked blankly at the opposite side, not even understanding what they were talking about. He pointed at the three of them and instructed, Prepare to leave before I return. Don't go ahead without me. Reek placed a hand on his chest and assured him, Don't worry, we are of one mind and one heart. Ian replied blankly, All right. Seeing him leave, he immediately turned to give orders. Well then, first, check the number of mercenaries. Lucy frowned, glancing thoughtfully in the direction where Ian had just departed. Then, she turned and headed deeper into the forest. Inside a narrow cliffside crevice, the drake's voice resonated, introducing, This is my nest. Ian looked around the cave, letting out a sound of shock. Seeing that, the creature roared in anger. What kind of reaction is that? It's too late to regret it now. The boy hurriedly raised his hands to deny it. I didn't mean it like that. I was just examining. Ian looked around, his face grimacing. He was already sleepy, and using the Moronius language made him even more exhausted. His face was full of fatigue as he let out a sigh. Let's get this over with quickly, so I can go rest. If we just push those protruding rocks inside to flatten the wall, it should be much more spacious. Right after that, Ian closed his eyes, silently sensing the energy fluctuations. After a moment, his lips moved slightly as he chanted, Oh, Earth. The Earth's energy appeared and probed. You again? Human. Ian looked forward with a serious face. I have a request. Her voice echoed in refusal. I'm not interested. I'm busy. Seeing this, the boy sighed to himself. She was truly very annoyed with him. Drake saw Ian wake up and immediately asked, How did it go? The boy replied, arms crossed over his chest. Earth refuses to talk to me. I'll try again when she's in a better mood. Ian's brows knitted tightly. I'll probably just be rejected again. Hearing this, the creature accepted it. If Earth has rejected you, then so be it. He looked over, startled, unable to hide his astonishment. Drake bowed his head, his face full of loss. She simply isn't my soulmate. Thank you for trying for someone like me. Ian couldn't help but want to comfort him. Drake looked straight ahead and asked, What is your mage's name? The boy's voice replied, Raven Arides Ian. Drake extended a claw and said, I am a long-tailed drake. From now on, we are friends. Ian reached out and gently grasped his claw, calling out, Drake. The two held onto each other's hands, looking at one another in silence. The screen displayed a notification. New skill acquired. Drake summoning magic. You can call upon your Drake friend. If it is a request from a friend, he will gladly respond. Ian looked at the notification with sadness. I have the skill, but I never expected I wouldn't be able to do anything for my friend. Suddenly, the Drake's voice rang out, making the boy look over. He waved his hand to reveal a vast amount of treasure behind him, to celebrate us becoming friends. I'll give them to you. Take as much as you like. Looking at the piles of gold and silver, the boy thought to himself. Just as the master said, the dragon race has a hobby of collecting treasure. It seems their relatives are the same. Ian reached out and picked up a sparkling stone. It's a pity that if Earth saw these, she would probably listen to me immediately. Suddenly, he froze, standing still in place. Ian started, suddenly realizing Wait, if I use this the right way. He immediately turned his head to ask, Drake, can I draw a few lines on the ground? He looked at the boy, his face full of confusion, and asked back, Draw? After a long while, Ian stood silently looking at the stone sitting in the middle of the magic circle. He pursed his lips, thinking, I forgot the method the master taught me. Ian watched the light emitting from the magic circle. If the arcane is throwing a tantrum, you just need to offer a gift via magic circle. Drake looked over, his face full of suspicion. What are you planning to do? The boy smiled and replied, Just watch and you'll know. Ian looked up joyfully and shouted, Oh, Earth! A voice responded from the space. What is it? Young human. The boy immediately shouted loudly. Move the rocks to flatten the wall. Blinding light radiated from the stone, mixing with a pale blue glow. Lines of incantations appeared incessantly. The cliff wall began to crack, then quickly receded. Sunlight from outside shone through the gap into the interior. Drake was startled as he felt the light from outside shining in. His eyes widened, unable to believe it. This is my nest. Ian looked at the luxuriously decorated cave in front of him and continued. It's a gift for you. Drake shouted with sparkling eyes in disbelief. The boy bowed his head, looking proud. It seemed he was about to cry with emotion. He looked at the beautiful cave and shouted, So big, so beautiful. Drake tilted his head back and took a deep, heavy breath. It even smells good. He glanced to the side and asked, Ian, did you use magic to create this scent too? The boy immediately denied. No. Drake grabbed his hand with a claw and shouted, Thank you, friend. He lifted Ian up, his face full of immense joy. With this, I have nothing to be ashamed of before her. Even if offspring are born, they will be safe staying here. The boy shouted in alarm. I didn't account for that, Ian replied, face full of helplessness. Well, as long as you're happy. After a while, his feet finally touched the ground. Hey, Ian looked blankly and reached out to touch his own ear, deep in thought. What is this? He hurriedly covered his mouth, looking suspicious. Ian looked at Drake's worried face, wondering why. He screamed in horror. Hey, are you okay? Is that blood? Drake watched as he collapsed to the ground and fainted, then shouted, Ian! Drake grabbed Ian in a panic. Buddy, wake up! He looked at Ian's terrifyingly pale complexion and became even more frantic. Oh my God! What on earth am I supposed to do? Just then, a voice echoed from afar. Mage! Lucy rushed over. As soon as she saw her, Drake immediately widened his eyes in alert. She also looked up in fear. Lucy slammed on the brakes, her boots dragging on the ground. He gently laid Ian on the ground, then turned back to bare his fangs and growl threateningly. Lucy was trembling so much that her voice wavered, but she still tried to stay calm and raised her hands to explain. Wait, Drake, just listen to me. I'm Ian's friend, so please don't eat me. Drake tilted his head in confusion. Ian, friend. Just then, Ian beside them stirred slightly and let out a soft groan. Both of them immediately snapped their heads to look at him. His eyes remained shut, his face twisted in pain. The sky gradually turned dark. The small room was lit only by a flickering candle. Ian finally woke up slowly. He waved his hands around drowsily, subconsciously repeating, What time is it? Where's my phone? Ian's hand suddenly touched something soft nearby. He still hadn't opened his eyes, his mind fuzzy. Why is the phone so soft? Has the material turned into gummy candy? His fingers unconsciously gave a gentle squeeze and thought. So soft, it feels like a cat's paw. Just then, Lucy's voice sounded nearby. You're awake? Ian immediately opened his eyes wide. He sat up with a start. So confused he began to stutter. Kathy, why are you here? Am I still dreaming? It's like I'm recording a video with my phone. Lucy, with a worried expression, immediately advised. Lie down for a bit. You're still dizzy. Sure enough, the next second, a wave of severe dizziness hit, making Ian clutch his head. She hurriedly reached out to check on him. You okay? Don't jump up so suddenly like that. He squinted, beginning to recall. All right, I passed out. I overexerted my summoning rank trying to communicate with Drake. Thinking of that, Ian slowly looked up at Lucy, then immediately pulled his hood down to cover most of his face, feeling anxious. Damn it, did she see everything? I'm so embarrassed I want to disappear. After calming down, he looked around and asked, Where's Drake? She hesitated slightly before answering. He suddenly left. Ian let out a sigh, speculating in his mind. Did that guy go look for her? He scratched his head sheepishly. Sorry for the trouble. Lucy looked at him gently and shook her head. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. Ian was silent for a few seconds, then remembered something else. By the way, how did you get in here? Wasn't it very hard to get past Drake? She recounted everything seriously. I just said I was your friend. He seemed disbelieving as he repeated. How? Immoronious. Lucy looked at him blankly. What is that? Ian's eyes went wide. What? Did she just barge in here using a translation app or something? But fatigue quickly overwhelmed him, causing his vision to blur. I'm still so sleepy. Right at that moment, Lucy seemed to muster all her courage to speak up. Actually, I came here knowing the danger. Mage Ian, there's something I want to tell you. The ambush last night was caused by me. Unexpected, right? Sorry for causing trouble. Ian also scratched his head in confusion. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. He recalled her fearful demeanor that day and thought, is that why you were trembling like that? Ian cleared his throat, frowning as he questioned. So you were involved with those bandits? Now you're planning to reveal your true identity. Huh. Lucy immediately retorted, no. Do I look like a bandit to you? Ian replied seriously. In fantasy, a beautiful bandit leader is a familiar trope. She flushed red with anger and embarrassment, but couldn't refute it. Finally, Lucy just bowed her head and whispered a confession. To tell the truth, this is a secret. I'm not Kathy. Hearing this, an image immediately popped into Ian's head. Lucy wearing a gorgeous dress, proudly declaring, I am the princess of a nation. His mouth replied casually, is that so? But deep down, he was in a state of extreme panic. Don't tell me you're actually a princess. She recounted seriously, my real name is Lucy. Lucy of the Tarian family. Those bandits were sent by my fiancé to kidnap me. Ian looked at her, the word he just heard repeating in his mind. Fiancé? His eyes lit up. Don't tell me it's a lover's quarrel. Realizing that strange look, Lucy immediately dismissed it. What's with that look? It's not what you think. Actually, I intended to run away far enough so he wouldn't find me. But after what happened yesterday, I don't have the confidence to run away alone anymore. She grabbed his hand and said in a sincere voice, so please, Ian, help me escape. Ian asked in confusion, wait, hold on. Why are you running away in the first place? Did your fiancé do something bad? Lucy recounted fearfully. The Tarian family is a barony managing the Fine-Lep territory. Because we lack serving knights, we are always threatened by outside forces. Because we lack serving knights, we are always threatened by outside forces. Finally, the family married me off to a knight, who was a former mercenary captain. Because he was the captain of the most powerful mercenary group at the time, the forces targeting our family decreased. At first, even he seemed satisfied with the status of being the husband of a baron's daughter. But then he began to abuse the power he gained from that position. He started establishing a harem and treated me like a joke. My parents couldn't take it anymore and demanded an annulment. But that man poisoned my parents. Recounting this, Lucy's voice couldn't help but choke up. She continued sobbing. Because if the engagement was annulled, he would lose his power, so he poisoned my parents and silenced the servants. Ian frowned, cursing internally. This guy is a real animal. Lucy tried to regain her composure and added, no matter how good he is with his sword, if he doesn't marry me, he is just a commoner. He also cannot inherit the Tarian family assets. Therefore, I escaped with the help of a servant. Even if I die, I won't marry a person like that. To ensure the marriage takes place, he will certainly continue to hunt me down. So please, Ian, help me escape safely. So please, Ian, help me escape safely. And just like that, the fiancé is standing before the risk of being kidnapped. This feeling is truly complicated. I don't know how to describe it. I really can't understand the mindset of those in power in the medieval era. Lucy was still clutching his hand. Her voice choked. Please, I will definitely repay you. I swear it on the honor of the Tarian family. Ian scratched his head, wondering, why me? What if I betray you? She immediately explained, well, he's very stingy. Even if you sold me out, he would only give you a few silver coins. She pressed her lips together and continued. As for me, I can give you everything. He repeated with a confused look. Everything. Her voice sounded decisive. Yes. If you want, I can even hand over the Tarian family to you. The atmosphere fell into silence. Ian looked at her quietly, his mind starting to race. Does that mean I could even marry her? A farmer's kid who could become a noble. What a rare opportunity. But if things really went that far, what about Ian Arides Raven, the disciple of Mage Arides? Living as a noble and getting involved in politics wouldn't be a bad life. But if I was born in a fantasy world, shouldn't I be dedicated to pursuing magic? Helping Lucy, I should be able to gain experience as a mage. Shouldn't I be dedicated to pursuing magic? Helping Lucy, I should be able to gain experience as a mage. He cleared his throat and spoke up. Honestly, you should ask someone better with a sword than me, because after all, a mage is not a warrior. Lucy was terrified, her voice choking up. Ian suddenly stood up, interrupting her. But if there's payment, I will help you escape. As for the consequences later, you handle them yourself. Lucy heard this and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. The boy immediately panicked. Hey, why are you crying? Did I say something too harsh? I'm in, I'll help you. She reached out and grabbed his hand, saying sincerely, thank you so much. As she spoke, Lucy leaned onto his shoulder, tears streaming down. Ian said nothing, just silently comforting her with a warm hug. The sun rose higher. Drake was lying on the grass, his face full of satisfaction as he enjoyed the sunlight. A slight noise from the cave entrance made him lift his eyelids to look over. Seeing Ian walk out, Drake immediately said joyfully, Buddy, how's your condition? He nodded in confirmation. I'm fine, muttering to himself. He even tried to strike a pose in the sun to look cool in front of her. Ian looked up at the sky and suggested, We should go down the mountain early. Everyone is waiting. Thanks for the gift. Drake looked at him joyfully. It's nothing special. Hop on. I'll give you a ride. Ian didn't hesitate to climb on immediately. Thanks, Drake. Lucy stood nearby, looking at the two with a bewildered expression. Unlike the attentive look from before, Drake turned and shouted at her. Hey, Ian's girl, you get on too. Ian shook his head to stop him. Hey, Drake, it's not like that. He turned his head with a confused expression. It's not. Lucy stood still, her face full of question marks. What are they talking about? While she was still confused, an arm suddenly reached out toward her. Ian leaned slightly toward her, softening his voice. Get on the back. Lucy grabbed his hand and climbed on behind him. Drake saw that both were seated firmly and immediately stood up, his face full of excitement. All right then, let's go. He flicked his tail and bolted away like a gust of wind. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, Andrian looked around anxiously and urged, You saw it too. All the mercenaries who came with us were wiped out. If the bandits are still lurking around here, we're goners. Dew clenched his teeth and retorted. But would real bandits wander aimlessly in the forest? Besides, if they had brains, wouldn't they have retreated by now? But regardless, there's such a thing as duty. He immediately argued back. People who become bandits didn't have brains to begin with. They will definitely hunt us down. The two argued for a while and then looked over simultaneously. Sir Reek, what do you think? Reek was sitting silently on a large rock, his hands supporting his chin as if he were thinking about something very seriously. Suddenly, he opened his eyes wide. After a few seconds of silence, Reek concluded, Let's wait for the mage. Andrian frowned and asked, What? Julian happily gave a thumbs up in support. As expected, we'll follow the captain's decision. Reek crossed his arms, smiling confidently, thinking, even Drake he managed to defeat, he couldn't possibly be done for. There must be some reason he's going slowly. They believed that without a doubt. But 10 minutes later, they were ambushed by the bandits. Everyone's face was bruised, and they regretted it deep down. We should have run instead of waiting. Connor raised a hand in warning. Hey, stop crying. I'll make this quick. The other three had tears streaming down their faces, trembling as they begged. Spare us. We'll give you anything. Hearing that, the man slowly sheathed his sword and began to negotiate. Then hand over that girl. Reek froze immediately. That girl. Connor stepped right in front of him, his voice low and threatening. That's right. I heard there's a beautiful girl with dark blue hair. Don't play dumb. Reek's mouth hung open as he stammered. Dark blue hair. Andrian, standing beside him, also turned to look at him blankly, repeating, a beauty. At that very moment, both Julian and Andrian realized almost simultaneously that the person Connor was referring to was Kath. Connor looked down at the three of them again and asked, Where is she? Reek looked around in fear and whispered, Hey, find Kathy quickly. Julian searched while trembling. Where did she go? A few seconds later, all three shouted almost at the same time, "She's not here." Hearing this, the man immediately drew his sword again, his voice turning cold. "I see." The three hugged each other, sobbing and begging. "Please spare us, mage." Just then, the ground shook violently. The bandits turned around in a panic, looking everywhere. What was that? Reek, nearly moved to tears, shouted loudly. The mage brought a drake. "We're saved." Connor frowned in confusion. A mage? A drake? A bandit behind him suddenly widened his eyes and screamed. From a distance, the drake was rushing toward them at terrifying speed. The man squinted, noticing the girl sitting on its back, and wondered, "Isn't that the girl?" His accomplice next to him swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Maybe, but isn't that thing she's riding right now a drake?" Connor's face turned pale. He almost screamed as he ran. Under the morning sunlight, an excited voice rang out. "I'm so glad you're okay." Kathy, Reek with a bruised eye, held up a finger. "It's lucky you were with the mage. Otherwise, those guys definitely would have done terrible things to you." Lucy couldn't help but mutter, "I think your face looks worse right now." Andrian stood with his hands on his hips, suspicious. How did those guys know about Kathy? Julian, standing nearby, startled and exclaimed, "Now that I think about it, as soon as we arrived, they were looking for Kathy right away. They're part of the angelic church, yet they do things like this. It's too much." Ian, standing behind, listened to these words deep in thought. The angelic church. His gaze sharpened. It had been a long time since he heard that name. Ian couldn't help but recall the largest religion in the world in his mind. The angelic church. Their doctrine forbade turning believers into slaves, but human traffickers and slave traders had long since discarded those commandments. Ian hugged his chest with both arms, calculating silently. More importantly, even after seeing the mage and the drake, they still hadn't given up on Lucy. He stood still, watching her figure nearby. They really were stubborn hunters. Did they want to marry her that badly? Ian thought about Connor's group, his face twisting in annoyance. This isn't good. At this rate, sooner or later, they'll be discovered. He then turned his head to the side. "Drake, can you do me a favor?" He looked over and answered firmly, "Of course, go ahead." Ian put a hand on his hip and requested, "I want you to chase all those people away. If necessary, you can kill them." The drake's eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty glint. "If it's a request from a friend, I am willing." He tilted his body to watch the creature's back as it quickly sped away. Ian stood in place, calculating in his heart. Of course, he didn't truly want to say kill, but this was a medieval fantasy world where killing was commonplace. If he wanted to survive in this world, he had to change too. Suddenly, he startled, letting out a pain moan. Ian reached up to support his head. Perhaps he had used too much Moronius language again. Seeing this, Lucy immediately ran over to support him, concerned. "Ian, is it too much for you?" Ian clutched his head and said, "I'm fine." She frowned and complained. "You call that fine?" Reek's eyes sparkled as he rubbed his chin, staring at the two of them. He watched their intimate interaction and probed. "You two seem really close. Are you dating?" Afterward, Ian closed his eyes and lay down on the carriage, leaving with Reek's group. He felt a flash of light and startled, eyes snapping open. Ian looked at the notification screen. "Your drake just killed one more person." He pondered with a start. That makes 11. The automatic report from the summoning magic really is convenient. But unfortunately, he couldn't call it out right in front of everyone. He stared fixedly at the notification screen in front of him. Suddenly, a call sounded in his ear. "Ian," he replied in a soft voice. "Drake." On the other side, the creature spewed a mouthful of flame toward Connor's group and replied, "I've chased away everyone I saw." Ian hugged his chest, smiling brightly. "Thanks, you've helped me a lot." The drake smiled back, answering foolishly, "As long as it makes you happy, buddy, that's enough." In the canyon, his voice resonated. "Do you have to go?" He replied calmly, "Yes, it's a pity, but we have to say goodbye." Ian's mind filled with memories of the two of them. Drake couldn't leave the mountain range. It was a shame they couldn't meet again. Drake bowed his head, speaking in a low voice. "Thanks for everything." He looked up. "Same here." Suddenly, he lowered his head, his face full of urgency. "Oh, that's right. Are you interested in the mysteries of the Phoenix? Inside the fortress of Riverview, which a river flowed through, Ian hugged his chest, unable to stop himself from thinking. A phoenix, you say? In his mind, the things Drake had told him appeared. I heard there's an ice phoenix in the northern mountains. Why not try going there to see it? Ian silently contemplated the information. A phoenix is a bird that doesn't disappear even when it dies. Not only is the fire phoenix famous, but there are also ice, wind, and earth variants. They change their forms depending on the environment. They are known as monsters with extremely high adaptability. Ian's brows knitted in worry. He didn't know if he could summon it. Reek's group, faces full of smiles, quickly ran over. Mage. He held a hand out, probing. We're about to meet the Lord. Would you like to come with us? Ian glanced to the side, deep in thought. To keep Lucy safe and hidden, it's best not to attract the attention of someone as high-ranking as a lord. Andrian also suggested with excitement, Kathy, if you have nowhere to go, come with us. She looked around, shyly agreeing. Immediately after, Lucy startled as she felt Ian drape his arm over her shoulder. He pointed a finger at her and spoke. We will stay at an inn before we head out. Julian and Andrian gasped in shock. Lucy's whole face turned red. She looked up intently at Ian. She closed her eyes, leaning her head against his chest. Ah, I'm a little tired. Reek behind them saw this scene and was overcome with excitement. So they are... He clutched his chest, face flushed red, laughing loudly. They really are dating. The people around them heard the loud laughter and looked over, suspicious. Lucy laughed, looking at Ian as she shouted, Pretending to date you is more convenient. No need to deal with annoying people. He didn't even turn his head as he asked back. Is that so? Her cheeks flushed as she asked suspiciously. But hey, why do you use honorifics with commoners? Ian replied with a calm face. Because I am a commoner. I'm a farmer's son. Lucy asked, curious. But you're a mage now? Ian walked quickly ahead and added. No special reason. I'm just imitating my master. Deep down, he couldn't help but mutter. I want to become someone like my master, friendly and polite. Lucy heard this and replied softly, her eyes still following him. His voice sounded, asking, So what do you plan to do next? She continued in a low voice. For now, I plan to meet Count Katina. Lucy called out, her face serious. He is my maternal uncle. If I explain the situation, he will surely help. Ian turned his head to look, curious. It sounded like her mother and the Count were quite close. She raised her eyebrows slightly and looked elsewhere. He's not bad. Ian heard that and stared at Lucy. If it wasn't certain that they were close, it would be a bit suspicious. He suddenly stopped, asking worriedly, Besides your uncle, is there no one else you can trust? Lucy immediately panicked. Wait, are you doubting my uncle? There is no one in this world more trustworthy than... Ian looked over with a calm face. Is that so? In his heart, he thought. If she said so, he must be a good person. Lucy reached up to pull her collar, looking away. It's still better than someone I don't know at all. Others would surely find a way to marry me off. She smiled, leaning in to tease. Of course, if a brilliant mage like you proposed, I'd be very happy too. Ian looked in the other direction. Here we go again. Immediately after, he looked over with a serious face. Our contract ends when we meet Count Katina, okay? Lucy put her hands behind her back, unsatisfied. Isn't that too cold? A noble is offering to marry you, you know. Ian, still not paying much attention, continued, There are still many other women in the world beside. She was visibly annoyed, her cheeks puffing up. Next, Lucy, her face flushed red, walked forward in anger. You scoundrel! He saw that and quickly chased after her. Where are you going? The inn is in this direction. After a long while, the bell at the door of the inn rang. As soon as Ian and Lucy entered, a welcoming sound echoed. Welcome! He quickly walked to the counter. We'd like to stay for a few nights and use the bathhouse. Ian placed a money pouch on the table, asking, Is this enough? Leon looked at the gold coins inside the pouch, his expression becoming respectful. More than enough. I'll prepare the room right away. Right after that, she pointed a hand at Lucy and asked, By the way, will the young lady be bathing too? She immediately raised both hands to cover her chest, full of caution. No need. Thank you. Ian frowned and called out, Why? Don't tell me you think the water is dirty too. Lucy's face turned red, Partly, but she gripped the rim of her hat, calling out uncomfortably, "Do I really have to say it out loud?" Ian looked over, suspicious, and said nothing. Afterward, he entered the medieval bathhouse, which had no partitions. Ian, upon realizing this, was stunned in place. He looked at Lucy's shy demeanor and said, "Then I'll go alone." She, face full of exhaustion, reached out to take off her cloak. Honestly, immediately, the men in the area stared over with lustful eyes. A flash of light appeared in Ian's eyes as he glanced around. He immediately shouted loudly, "Lucy, put your cloak back on." She raised her head proudly, hands on her hips, and spoke, "Call me Kathy." Ian immediately lunged forward, reaching out to pull Lucy's cloak up. "Hurry, everyone is looking." She adjusted her cloak, shouting in anger, "Good heavens, how annoying." Henry's group nearby broke into a malicious smile, looking inside the inn. Chatter echoed from the room. "Did you see that woman from earlier?" Felix, face full of infatuation, spoke. "In my whole life, I've never seen a beauty like that." Even beside him, rubbed his hands and grumbled, "Truly an angel descended from heaven." Henry thought of Ian's slender figure and continued, "Beside her, there's only one person, and he's just a weak young master." He offered a wicked smile. "How about we grab her and have some fun?" Felix immediately chimed in, "Sounds good, but it doesn't look like they're staying for long." The corner of Henry's mouth curled up. "Then that's that." Even behind him, cracked his wrists and shouted, "Let's grab her today." The next morning, inside the magnificent castle, a voice asked, "I see. So you want to do business here?" Waltz, one hand supporting his chin, waved his hand to dismiss them. "Just do a good job. Don't cause me any trouble." Reek immediately knelt, respectfully thanking him. "Thank you, my lord." He knelt on one knee on the ground, looking up in thought. "I heard that if I just won the Baron's favor, I might be able to enter this castle tonight." Suddenly, a light bulb went off in Reek's head. Right? Why not tell him about the mage? Immediately after, he bowed his head and shouted, "Lord Baron, there is something I wish to report." Walt raised an eyebrow, asking, "What is it?" Immediately after, he bowed his head and shouted, "Lord Baron, there is something I wish to report." Walt raised an eyebrow, asking, "What is it?" Walt was overjoyed to hear this, gently stroking his mustache. "Very commendable. Speak." Reek put a hand on his chest and recounted sincerely, "Actually, while traveling, I met a mage." Afterward, he started waving his arms as he recounted, "He did this, and then whoosh, he did this other thing too, and saved us." Walt sat up straight, touching his chin, pondering, truly astonishing. Suddenly, Reek raised a finger, his voice dropping. "Hey, don't be surprised just yet." He slapped his hands together and added, "That mage is currently at an inn in this town." Waltz's face turned pale, and he startled, screaming, "What?" Waltz's face turned pale, and he startled, screaming, "What?" Waltz imagined the scene of Ian going crazy, releasing the Drake to burn and kill everything, and his expression turned even uglier. No, the situation would be even worse, because right now, there was already a group of lunatics in this territory. Waltz remembered the other group that had just arrived, the St. Santiago Knights. They were people who took up arms to serve God. They were both monks and warriors. Instead of participating in wars, they hunted demons and monsters. The Knights claimed to be the protectors of humanity. Waltz couldn't help but worry. But if those Santiago Knights and a mage who tamed a drake crossed paths in this territory, Waltz's whole face turned pale, filled with anxiety. Immediately after, he panicked and screamed, "Commander!" Kevin immediately put a hand on his chest and replied, "Yes, sir." Waltz pointed a finger at Reek and ordered, "Prepare a room for this man." His face was covered in cold sweat. Also, immediately summoned the Santiago Knights. Outside the castle, Waltz's fearful voice echoed, "Bring them here before something happens." At the same time, at the inn, Ian and Lucy were eating in the main hall. Nearby, a burly man with a thick beard asked angrily, "Where is my food?" Lion, worried, apologized, "Sorry, I'll prepare it right away." She supported her chin with one hand, letting out a sigh. "The bathwater still isn't ready." Ian stood up immediately. "Let me do it myself. I'm the helper anyway." Leon asked in surprise, "Are you sure?" "I'm so sorry." Especially as he was eating, he leaned into Lucy's ear to remind her, Go upstairs after you finish eating. She nodded in response. Understood. As soon as Ian left, Lucy continued sipping her soup, one spoonful at a time. Henry, behind her, saw her sitting alone and broke into a sly smile. A while later, Lucy finished eating and went up the stairs alone, quietly. She clasped her hands behind her back, skipping happily toward her room. Suddenly, a hand appeared, grabbing Lucy's arm to stop her. Young lady. Henry looked at her and asked in a low voice, May I ask if you are a companion of the young man with black hair who just went out? Lucy immediately pulled her arm back, questioning in a cold voice. Who are you? He looked sincere, placing a hand on his chest as he replied, I'm the person he hired to run errands. Immediately after, Henry produced a gold coin and added, He told me to take you to the dock right now. Lucy, face full of caution, asked back, I thought he went to bathe. He immediately explained, but it seems something happened right after he left the bathhouse. She thought of the Graham group and turned pale. Don't tell me those guys have followed us here. Henry immediately held out a hand, urging her loudly. There's no time left. Please follow me. Lucy quickly followed him as they left. Okay. She hurried after Henry, running down the stairs. The door of the inn was quickly pulled open. Lucy ran in a panic, following his retreating figure as they went further away. Suddenly, she let out a gasp and stopped abruptly. From above, Lucy saw him sitting by the pot of water in the courtyard. Just then, Henry, from behind, raised a sack high. Right after, the door of the inn was quickly slammed shut. He was sitting in the courtyard when he suddenly heard Lucy's voice calling, Ian. He turned his head in confusion, looking behind him. Lucy. Ian looked on in confusion as Felix raised a wooden club from behind his back to strike him. He immediately lowered his head, dodging the attack gracefully. The man tripped over his own feet immediately. Ian looked at Felix, who had fallen next to him, letting out a groan. He frowned, staring at him, deep in thought. It seems they aren't henchmen of her fiancé, just a bunch of lowlives. Henry and even saw Ian looking over and immediately urged, Hurry up. He immediately gritted his teeth, staring at the two, intending to chase after them. Felix immediately stood up to block the door. Don't even think about running. Ian reached up to hold his head and sighed. Good heavens, how annoying. Deep down, he cursed in anger. Because of this guy, I lost their trail. Immediately after, streams of blue light appeared. Felix saw the magical power flowing past and screamed in fear. What is that? Ian closed his eyes, sensing the flow of power, pondering. With my current strength, I can't use magic indiscriminately. In that case, among the mysteries willing to lend me their power, I must find one I can control. In the darkness, the energy of shadows replied, Human, the light is fading. It is the perfect time for a bit of fun. Let's play together. Ian immediately opened his eyes wide. This voice, the darkness. Next, he raised a hand high, shouting, Oh, darkness. Felix saw the streams of dark aura and screamed in fear. What is that? He crouched down to the side, shouting in terror. Why is it so dark suddenly? I can't see anything at all. Ian's eyes flashed with bright red light as he replied, When I cast shadow magic, only I can see. You jerk. Immediately after, the sounds of beating echoed, along with Felix's pleas, Spare me. Suddenly, from afar, the sound of footsteps of a group running toward them echoed. Ian immediately looked up. Did this guy call for reinforcements? He waved his hand, gently dispelling the darkness around him. Ian looked down at Felix, who was sitting on the ground, questioning him. Hey, where did you take her? He smiled broadly and shouted, Look, I see it now. Ian swung the wooden staff, striking Felix hard on the head, shouting, Answer me, you bastard. Suddenly, a white shadow streaked past Ian's side. He turned his head and saw the dagger buried deep in the wall. Ruta stepped in front of Ian, blocking him. Enough, young man. His face turned serious when he heard him inquire, The darkness from a moment ago. Ruta asked calmly, Was it you who summoned it? Ian looked at the group opposite him with a calm face. Yes, I am the mage who summoned the darkness. Ruta led the group, staring at him seriously. Ian frowned, full of confusion, glancing toward him. The murderous intent is truly staggering. Who is that old man? Felix, his face bruised and swollen, knelt on the ground, pleading to Ruta, Please save me. He reached out to hug his leg. Please save me. That mage is trying to kill me for no reason. Ruta heard that and startled, asking back, "What?" Ruta heard that and startled, asking back, "What?" The corner of Ruta's mouth curled up. "I see." He clasped his hands behind his back, looking straight ahead. If he's a mage, then it's understandable. Under the afternoon sun, the pot on the stove was releasing thick clouds of steam. Ian looked up and asked coldly, "What do you mean by easy to understand?" Ruta replied with a calm expression, "Aren't mages just like that by nature?" He held his head high and added coldly, "People who do whatever they please." Hearing this, Ian was so angry that his whole body trembled. Then his gaze swept over the others. "What does that old man think a mage is?" Ian clenched his hand around his sword and shouted, "Stop spouting nonsense." With a face full of indignation, he raised his fist and yelled, "That guy attacked first. Why would I hit someone for no reason? Damn it." Immediately after, the whole space fell into absolute silence. Ian stiffened, panic rising in his heart. Crap, I spoke too loudly. If that old man gets angry and draws his sword. Suddenly, Ruta across from him broke into a radiant smile. He clasped his hands behind his back and said, "The way you talk, it seems you are a mage with real ability." He stepped forward and added with a serious look, "However, that doesn't mean you are allowed to use dark magic." Ian's face immediately darkened, and he gritted his teeth as he retorted, "Dark magic?" The man immediately stepped right in front of him and asserted, "That's right. Covering the surroundings in darkness means hiding from the sunlight, the eyes of the heavens." Ruta crossed his arms over his chest, his lips curling into a smile. "Hiding in the darkness is a despicable act." Hearing this, Ian looked up. Darkness is despicable for rejecting the light? Huh. He stared at the people in front of him, deep in thought. These guys use this kind of religious rhetoric. They must be followers of the angelic church. Shortly after, Ian covered his mouth and let out a cough. He asked back with a calm face, "Isn't it the will of the heavens that day and night coexist? If the divine will lies only in the light, then why does night exist?" Dietrich paused, stammering that. Ian shouted with a stern face, "Just as the existence of the sun creates light, its absence creates darkness, which is also a law of the heavens. I didn't invent a non-existent law myself. So what is wrong with using?" Dietrich, arms crossed over his chest, stood frozen on the spot. The people following behind immediately gathered around and started whispering. After a long while, a man pressed his lips together in silence. Then, with a bright smile, he shouted, "It's true. Without permission, no one can create darkness under the sunlight." Then, with a bright smile, he shouted, "It's true. Without permission, no one can create darkness under the sunlight." Felix immediately shrieked in surprise. "What? Little sister?" Hearing this, Ruta's eyes glanced toward him with killing intent. "So the reason you attacked this person is because he is an accomplice of the kidnappers?" Ian also glanced over. "Yes." Felix, head covered in cold sweat, denied. "No." He hung his head, and under that murderous gaze, he stammered an explanation. "That's not it." Ruta raised a hand to give an order. "Dietrich, you stay here and watch him." He placed a hand on his chest and replied, "Understood, Master." He walked toward Ian with his hands clasped behind his back. "Young mage, I apologize for taking up your precious time." Ruta smiled brightly and offered a hand. "Let me lend a hand as an apology." By the riverbank, Even and Henry were struggling to row the boat far away. Ian led Ruta's group and quickly caught up to the scene. A man pointed his hand toward the boat. "That is where the witness said they were." The man with the ponytail clenched his fist in anger. "I didn't expect them to escape by boat." The person next to him also roared in indignation. "What cowards!" Ian glanced toward that direction, pondering. The sun has set. Moving by boat is very dangerous. So, suddenly, a voice rang out that startled him. "Everyone!" Ian looked back with a confused face. "What's the matter?" Ruta enthusiastically raised his fist high. "For a stranger, let us cross that night together and take the boat out." The people behind clenched their fists and shouted loudly. "The Santiago Knights, protectors of the weak, we are willing to join." Ian turned to look at those people, thinking, so they're knights, protectors of the weak. That sounds pretty cool. He held out a hand to advise. "It's very dangerous to get on a boat at this time." Ruta smiled brightly and waved his hand. "No need to be so polite, just talk normally." Ian froze on the spot. "I've been talking like this the whole time." He was still smiling brightly. Here we go again. Ian watched Henry's group and started to discuss. I just found a hook. I'll pull the boat closer. When I do, throw the hook over there. Hearing that, Ruda was startled and exclaimed, You're going to pull the boat? He raised a hand and asked suspiciously, Aren't you a dark mage? How can you use water magic? He replied with a calm face. I have completed the beginner level in several different types of magic. Ruda looked at him intently with a serious face, thinking, This is strange. The mages I've seen on the battlefield could only use one element. His gaze turned sharp as he glanced behind. Besides, if you're only at the beginner level, shouldn't it be impossible to cast magic? Ian extended a hand forward and began to chant, "O river, come here." The knights were astonished to see the blue light gathering. The water in the river immediately surged high and rushed toward the shore. Ruda gasped in astonishment. That is far beyond any water magic on the battlefield. Henry on the boat felt the current dragging them. What is that? What is happening? Even who was rowing was also startled. The current is... Immediately after, they watched with panicked expressions as a wave crashed toward the boat. Under the twilight, the boat flipped over in the middle of the river. The knights gathered on the bank, looking toward that direction noisily. Just then, Lucy rushed over with eyes full of tears and hugged him tightly. Ian, Ruda, standing behind, eyes wide, questioned, "What are you doing? Can't you see your sister is crying?" Ian immediately reached out and patted Lucy's back gently. "It must have been very hard for you just now." She immediately buried her head in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Ian looked off to one side and let out a sigh. "Must get back to the inn to wash up quickly." He looked at the evening light in the distance and thought to himself, "But at that time, I didn't know that a peaceful bath in this world." On the street, Ba was riding a horse fast forward, urgently clearing the way. Loud shouts rang out. "Everyone, return to the inn immediately. That is a peace that can never be obtained." Hasten watched the white smoke rising high. That smoke was definitely from a battle. He rode his horse quickly toward that direction, face full of worry. Could the Lord's anxiety have come true? Hal looked at Bernard beside him and lamented, "This is troublesome. Just having to lead this inexperienced young master is already a headache." He bowed his head and could only let out a sigh. At the spot where the white smoke was rising, noisy sounds rang out. "Let me scrub your back. I'll do this side." Ian sat in the pot of hot water and replied, "I'm fine." Right after that, the room door was kicked open from the outside. Bernard immediately rushed in. "What are you doing?" Ian looked up with a dazed face. "Bathing." He and Hansen, upon hearing this, couldn't believe it and shouted, "Bathing." Bernard glanced at the boiling water pot. In a place like this, imperial people rarely bathe unless there is a special occasion. His eyes flashed with sparkling light. And with such a mess around, something must have happened. "As the eldest son of the Rivervilla Lord, I have the right to be reported." Bernard walked over, face full of excitement. "Explain it to me more clearly." Ruda hunched his back, placed a hand on his chest, and replied with a smile, "Lord Bernard, I am Ruda. Please allow me to explain." He crossed his arms over his chest and asked uncomfortably, "Why is it you?" "I am asking him." He heard that and asked back, startled, "What?" Ruda bowed his head and explained in a low voice, "That is because that person is a mage." Bernard exclaimed in shock, "A mage? What did you say?" Immediately after, a spark flashed in his mind. Is he planning to do that? Bernard placed a hand on his chest and arrogantly demanded, "Mage, I'm the heir of the Cowles clan. Get out of the tub immediately and pay your respects to me." Ian immediately remembered that there was a noble culture in this world called provoking a mage. Simply put, it was nobles deliberately provoking mages to test their strength. A mage who stays calm in the face of provocation is considered weak, while a mage who gets angry is considered truly powerful. Ian propped his hands on the edge of the bathtub, pondering, wait, is this the mage provocation that Lucy mentioned? He crossed his arms over his chest and looked down from above, refusing. No. Bernard immediately twisted his mouth and shrieked, "You! What did you say?" His whole body trembled, and he roared in anger. "You dare to refuse?" Bernard walked over and shouted indignantly, "Someone like you even dares to oppose me." Ian asked back with a calm face, "Why should I follow your orders?" He immediately struggled and gave an order. "Hansen, Pull that fake mage out right now. Ian saw Bernard being pulled back by Hansen and whispered, acting pretty well. Then he let out a silent sigh. Fine, if that's how it's going to be. Ian's eyes flashed with light, and he asked coldly, Fake? What did you say? Bernard watched the streams of light flashing around, terrified. What is this? Ian raised a hand high and flew up, and all the objects around immediately flew up. Bernard raised his hand in a panic and admitted his mistake. Stop it. I have seen enough of your strength. I apologize for my insolence. Right after that, in the blink of an eye, all the objects fell to the ground. Ian breathed a sigh of relief and stretched, thinking that should be enough to curb his bad habit. He stood stunned as he saw Bernard roll onto the ground and cry loudly. Ian's face stiffened, looking blankly at everything. Crap, did I go too far? What if his clan gets angry and executes me? The next day, inside once magnificent castle, sunlight from outside shone in. His voice rang out. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Waltz recalled the scene of Bernard hiding and crying, then said, And I heard my son cause you trouble yesterday. He looked weary, picked up his teacup, and sincerely apologized. Ian heard this and quickly replied, No, I should also apologize for going too far. Waltz looked suspiciously across the room. By the way, I heard you have a companion. Did you come alone? He replied with a calm face. She has things to take care of at the inn. In Ian's head, the scene before leaving appeared. It was not necessary for Lucy to show her face. Ruta guaranteed with a bright smile. We are watching your sister very carefully. Inside the magnificent room, a voice rang out. I see. He looked seriously at the person across from him and asked, By the way, may I ask your master's name? Ian answered indifferently. It's Lady Erides. Waltz heard this and exclaimed in surprise. I've heard of the potential star drawled. Master, are you heading south? He leaned back on the sofa and affirmed, Yes, because that's where the Magic Academy is. He asked back in astonishment. So she isn't heading toward the Palgar Duchy or the Roxland Duchy, right? Ian's face became tense. What do you mean? Waltz pondered for a long time and continued. The situation has been quite tense lately. He immediately paused when he heard the voice adding, It seems the Palgar Duchy is targeting Roxland. Ian couldn't help but worry when he heard that. It means a war could break out. Waltz looked coldly across the room and asked, Are you also heading south? He frowned tightly and denied. No, I will head east to search for the arcane. He held a hand forward. In that case, allow me to give you a gift. Ian looked over, full of questions. A gift? He looked at the wooden chest locked on the table. What could it be? Waltz pointed at that wooden chest and continued. Open it and see. Ian reached out and gently opened the lid of the wooden chest to look inside. Immediately after, he widened his eyes in surprise. This is a staff. Waltz's voice rang out, explaining that it was a staff once used by a wind element mage. He calmly looked toward the wooden box and added, Its name is Windwalker. Ian stared at it and instinctively repeated, Windwalker. He immediately reached out and grabbed the scepter inside. Waltz smiled and complimented as he saw Ian gripping the scepter. It suits you. He admired it for a moment. It looked like a normal staff, feeling like he had just received a starter set for a mage. The corner of Ian's mouth curled up, thinking happily, but it's still nice to receive a gift. Waltz crossed his arms and laughed loudly. This is a thank you for overlooking my son's insolence. Do you like it? He reached out and stroked the scepter, replying, Yes, thank you. Inside the castle, Ian thanked him sincerely. I accept it with gratitude. That afternoon, a loud shout rang out outside the inn. Ian grabbed the scepter and ran out, startled. What's wrong? Lucy, face full of worry, reached out and grabbed Ian's hand. It's an emergency. Her voice was filled with urgency. We need you. The image of a crow with red eyes, trapped in a cage, appeared before his eyes. Ian frowned and looked suspiciously at the creature in front of him. A crow. Ruta approached and said loudly, The hunter caught it this morning and intended to eat it, but your companion stopped him. Lucy smiled excitedly like a child. You are Ian Erides' raven, and this is Crow the Raven. Don't you think it's like some kind of fate? After hearing this, Ian's gaze at the other party became even more strange. Seeing him not say anything, Lucy wiggled again like a worm. This is fate, right? Ian sighed and turned his head coldly. Sorry for causing trouble. Just eat it. Her voice rose high in dissatisfaction. Hey, You're not showing any respect at all. The one who is a mage is me, not you, right? What are you talking about? Just waiting for that. Adrian grabbed the birdcage. Thanks for the confirmation. Then we'll eat it for lunch. But as he turned to walk away, Ian suddenly heard a desperate cry. Please save me. Kind human. He quickly turned back. Wait. Ian quickly used magic to talk to animals. What are you? Obsidian the crow was screaming and crying loudly. Please save me. Ian still tried to communicate with it under everyone's strange gaze. Answer me. What are you? But it only repeated the same sentence. Please save me. Looking at that, he fell into deep thought. It seemed it didn't understand the Moronius language. Perhaps it lacked the arcane, but Ian didn't give up on talking to it. Hey, crow. Obsidian is busy screeching like a house on fire. Please help me, don't kill me. Even though it jumped into his mouth, he was still patient. I'll help you. So shut up first. Done. It didn't understand, so it screamed even louder. Please come here. Ian was thoroughly driven mad. So he yelled even louder than it. All right, I'll help. So shut up. Only then did Obsidian agree to be well behaved. Seeing that, the corners of Ian's mouth lifted subconsciously. This guy doesn't understand words, but understands the situation. Beside him, Adrian and Dictry looked at him with admiring eyes. Mage, are you talking to the crow? That's amazing. Ian relayed its words. That's right. It says it wants to be saved. For now, just leave it to me. Hearing that, Lucy patted her chest triumphantly. See? I told you this crow was not ordinary. Ruta smiled the gentle smile of an elder. It seems the young miss, like you, also sees the arcane. Her head tilted up, almost parallel to the ceiling. Well, I've never studied it, but I probably have a talent for magic. Ian could only roll his eyes helplessly. Here we go again. Then he took Obsidian away and bandaged it. Ian looked at its silly appearance and smirked. Is that better now? Lucy watched the crow without taking her eyes off. Yeah, it'll get better soon. Suddenly, her face drooped with sadness. So how are you going to deal with this crow? Get it back to the hunter. After all that, Ian himself couldn't bear to, and then it would just be eaten. Obsidian seemed to understand, suddenly jumping onto his hand and humbly begging. Looks no different than a puppy. Please don't abandon me. The humans here are scary. Obsidian's tears kept falling like a faucet. Please. Ian's eyebrows almost knit together. What hassle. Ian didn't say anything more, just placed Obsidian on his shoulder. Seeing that, Lucy's eyes immediately lit up. Are you planning to take it with you? He nodded slightly. Actually, I'm only planning to keep it temporarily, at least until it fully recovers. She was excited again like a child. Then you have to name it. Ian hadn't thought of this, so he was slightly stunned for a moment. Name it. Lucy leaned in close, happily suggesting, why not call it Obsidian because its eyes are jet black? Looking at the crow's womanizing demeanor, he could only be helpless. This guy's happy because Lucy is paying attention to it. But Ian was too lazy to remember, so he immediately corrected. Too long, call it Oberon. She was only interested in having a new companion, so she was very easygoing. Okay. He reached out and gently rubbed Obsidian's head. From now on, your name is Oberon. A second later, it suddenly flapped its wings and announced loudly, quickly offer tributes, receive my favor. Ian's eyes made no effort to hide his disgust, suddenly acting arrogant. Must be happy, huh? Suddenly, Lucy proactively suggested, oh, right, Ian, I was thinking, why not join the Knights? He looked intently at the person beside him. The Knights? It was clear that she was a bit worried about the upcoming journey. I think it's better than going alone. Ian suddenly associated them with the image of those burly men. Makes sense, bandits wouldn't easily attack, but what if they aren't heading in the same direction as us? As if noticing Ian's hesitation, Ruta pushed the door and walked in. What are you worried about? He was startled. Elder. He sat down opposite Ian. Even if you are a mage, going alone with a woman is still dangerous. How about making a deal? He was a bit confused. A deal. On his face was a gentle smile. That's right. Actually, we are on our way to eliminate monsters that have appeared in Baron Katina's territory. Hearing those two words, Ian immediately tensed up. Monsters. Ruta's voice became much lower. Do you know the species called manticore? It's a monster in the form of a giant lion. The manticore is a ferocious beast known for its cruelty and love of killing. Ian vaguely understood the other party's intention. Yes. Don't tell me you wanted to go catch Manticore with you. But Ruta shook his head and denied. No, we don't want to drag you into danger. Of course, if you want to help, we won't refuse. Hearing this, Ian didn't speak for a long time. A moment later, he suddenly stood up from his chair and walked away with wide eyes. Then I refuse. Ruta laughed, quickly grabbing his shoulder. At least hear me out first. What we need from you is not hunting. Ian sat back in his old spot. Then, Ruta slowly told them about their background. Actually, we are a group of knights established by a branch of the Angelic Church. However, when we said we would go catch the Manticore, Ruta's expression showed clear sadness. It seems the priests in the Count's territory forced a mage to assist. That must have made them uncomfortable. So we want you to step forward and reconcile with that mage. A mage's word will carry more weight than a knight's. Ian heard this and just lowered his eyes and thought, not bad. Just need to coax that mage, and we'll have knights escorting us. After considering it for a while, he finally agreed. Then let's go together. This might have been the best decision Ian ever made. Traveling with the knights is actually very comfortable. The members of the Santiago Knights are all good people. They're strong enough that Ian doesn't have to lift a finger. No pressure at all. But if there's anything to complain about, while Ian was eating barbecue, Dick Try suddenly said loudly, Mage, would you like to study the scripture? The other two knights immediately followed enthusiastically. Let's study together. I'll join too. But of course, Ian flatly refused. No, thank you. All three shouted in unison, why not? He couldn't be bothered to pay attention and focused on eating. Although he said it was comfortable, they keep wanting to pull him into their religion. Ruta laughed a few times and sat down opposite Ian. What a shame. He was chewing meat and asked suspiciously, why so? He had long seen the potential in Ian. If you could have become a priest of the order. Hearing that, Ian fell into deep thought. The voice of a god? If I can really talk to a god, maybe I can ask why I was reincarnated and about the status window. After thinking it over, Ian approached Dick Try. Sir, can I join in the study of the scripture as well? All that night, he taught Ian with great dedication. He studied with intense focus, seemingly tireless. Just then, a gentle voice resonated with a very kind tone. Ian didn't even bother to look up. Yes, thank you for the compliment. Dick Tree's eyes widened in surprise. Why are you saying that all of a sudden? He didn't have a clue what was going on. You just said I had a good attitude. The man was scared out of his wits. I didn't say anything. Did you hear something? Ian thought he might be hallucinating from lack of sleep, but he had clearly heard someone speak. Just then, a thought flashed through his mind. That wasn't a human voice. The voice spoke again, with a hint of playfulness. Who knows? Ian suddenly jumped up, startling Dick Try. The voice still echoed in his head. Could it be that I am not something you can call human? Ian pointed at the sky and shouted, You're a god, aren't you? A giant vortex above suddenly spoke up. I suppose so. He gritted his teeth in anger, unable to utter a word. You. Ian refused to give up and kept pressing. What is that status window? Why did you reincarnate me into this world? But in response, he only received a mocking laugh that echoed throughout the air. He fumed and roared with all his might. Answer me. Suddenly, a beam of blue light shot down and passed right through Ian's body. The sky then became clear, just as it was before. He realized with a dark expression that something was wrong. Don't tell me. Ian felt dizzy, overwhelmed by a sense of loss. You're really leaving, aren't you? He gritted his teeth so hard the veins on his forehead popped. Hello, getting no response. Ian jumped up in anger. Hey God, get back here. A soldier next to him quickly held him back. Hey, while Ian was still struggling, shouting get down here right now, the other soldiers joined in to calm him down. Please stay calm. Hey, what's going on? After that, he frantically studied the scripture. The Creator, or God as they call him, threw me into this world just to watch and laugh. Ian received no answers, only cursing. Damn it. He wanted to ask God directly, but Ian's level of holy magic was too low to hold a dialogue. He stood up again, having no other choice. Then Ian quietly left the spot. I must accumulate more arcane points just to be able to talk to that damn god again. And the result was acquiring a new skill, holy magic. The ability to converse with the elegant, noble, sacred, beautiful, and absolute ruler of this world. Well done, Ian, and the punishment arrived immediately. Pay attention to God, study more, and understand Him better. The more you care, the happier God will be. The elegant, noble, sacred, and beautiful ruler of this world. Ian tearfully closed the book. Is this really the God who gave me this skill? At this moment, Ruda was swinging his sword to take down an intruder. With a single strike, the enemy quickly collapsed. Covered in blood, he glanced at those nearby. Hey, new mage, is everything all right? Ian timidly raised his hand, his voice like a mosquito's hum. Yes. But looking at the wounded people lying all over the ground, a fear rose in his heart. Of course not, because you guys wiped them all out. Ruda looked at Lucy, who was stammering nearby. Are you hurt? Her voice was hesitant. I'm fine. And what about the elder? As night fell, Ian looked up at the starry sky and upgraded his holy magic. A few days later, just as the first rays of light shone down, the sound of swords clashing in the forest rang out sharply. Below, both sides were fighting fiercely. The soldiers under his command joined in with high spirits. Hasten led the way. Master, the road splits in two. He seemed very familiar with this route. The east path leads to the Count's castle, while the west leads to the forest where the manticore appeared. Ruda pointed to a side of the forest where the mage was located. This way. Then he waved for everyone to follow. Let's go. Ian suddenly hesitated. Please wait a moment. Ruda seemed to understand Ian's worries and comforted him. No matter how old I get, I won't lose to things like this. Feeling relieved, he chatted comfortably. I heard you used to be a mercenary. That's so cool. He held the hilt of his sword with a confident look. I may not look like much, but I had quite a reputation in my youth. Then Ruda swung his sword with an imposing aura. That's why I used the title Elder. There are too many fools who only judge by my name and try to pick a fight. Ian's gaze darkened in contemplation. So, is it famous to the point where everyone recognizes the name? After that, he turned to Lucy, who was shyly standing nearby. Lucy, let's go meet the mage first, then we'll head to Katina territory. But she refused. No, I'll go ahead. Ian's face showed concern. Will you be okay alone? To reassure him, she smiled and quickly turned away. I'm not a child. Heading this way will get me to the elder's place quickly. Lucy even waved happily. See you later. Ian watched her back, his heart still filled with anxiety. Will she really be okay? Ian didn't take his eyes off Lucy, muttering to himself. I have to finish this quickly and follow Lucy. Suddenly, Ruda didn't see Lucy here and asked, Where did your sister go alone? He replied calmly, Just for a moment, I'll catch up right away. He put his arm around Ian's shoulder and grinned. Are you mentally prepared? Ian's expression showed annoyance. Mentally prepared? Ruda stopped smiling, his voice turning serious. Mages are temperamental, right? They are upset with the church. No telling what they might do. Ian glanced at him and questioned, Why do we have to clean up the church's mess? Ruda's face turned pale, his conscience pricking him as sweat poured down like rain. He remembered the image of the witch Monty Campbell, the plant mage, busy cooking. That stew looks delicious. Damien and his underlings rushed in from out of nowhere. Mage Monty, please help our knight or destroy the manticore. His gaze was murderous. Please don't forget, this is an official request from the church. Monty bared her fangs, with only a few teeth left. Really, she didn't stop stirring the pot. If you want me to help, at least eat what I cook and act like it's delicious. Ian followed Sanvardo to a house deep in the forest. An apothecary. He nodded slightly in confirmation. Yes, Monty Campbell is a famous apothecary. The reason behind it is very simple. Not only can she control plants, but she can also concoct extremely terrifying poisons from plant toxins. Having said that, Sanvardo cautiously reminded, Since we need potent poison to hunt the manticore, it just so happens. Suddenly, a pungent scent rushed straight into their noses. What is that smell? Ian paused in surprise. Wait, this smell is from inside the small house in the forest. The scent spread, and suddenly, a flesh-and-blood Monty appeared with a shrill laugh. I've been waiting for you, Santiago warriors. At this moment, Sanvardo frowned slightly at Monty Campbell's greeting. Monty simply issued an invitation. So glad you came. She directed her eyes toward the pot of stew on the table. Come, enjoy the feast I've prepared. A moment later, Ian's group entered Monty's house. Each was served a bowl of stew with an unappetizing smell. This smell is too strong. Ruda still hadn't taken his hand off his nose. No need to prove your strength this way. She sighed as if to explain, I am simply treating my guests to a rare dish made from plants my husband carefully cultivated. But the next second, she provoked them. And if you aren't guests, you can leave. This immediately left him speechless. On the other side, Lucy had to hold her nose to take a spoonful. Male, sitting next to her, only dared to watch, but to everyone's surprise, he couldn't help but vomit, all of which was seen by Mon. Did I go a bit too far? That thought suddenly stopped when she glanced at Ian. By the way, why is that guy eating so much? He's eating like he's never had such a delicious meal before. Who is that? Swallowing a whole bowl of garlic-filled soup like that. Being too curious, Monty Campbell hurried over to investigate. Are you okay? Ian didn't forget to grab a chicken leg while his eyes sparkled. It's delicious. This remark left her stunned for a second. Delicious. The doubt about her life arose in her heart. Impossible. He chose a whole unpeeled garlic bulb and exclaimed, That's right, especially this garlic, it's very delicious. As soon as he finished speaking, Ian popped it into his mouth. The people witnessing it froze, including Monty Campbell. She ran over, grabbed his shoulders, and screamed, Stop! I've been an apothecary for 40 years. I've never seen anyone as strange as you. Ian's eyes went wide, revealing a look of bewilderment. Strange? Monty crossed her arms, her gaze becoming probing. What's your name? He didn't hide anything and stated his name directly. Ian Arides Raven. Hearing that name, she started in panic. Arides. Monty's finger trembled as she pointed at Ian. Then you are. The next sentence was emphasized very clearly. The disciple of the fire mage Arides. And so, the story was told until nightfall. Please forgive me for testing you. Monty's voice had become much gentler. Consider an apology. Eat as much as you like. Ian cast his eyes on the plate of food neatly placed on the table. The chicken stew is really good. Just then, she mentioned the main issue. So, you plan to hunt the manticore. Someone spoke up to confirm. That's right. Immediately, Monty's face darkened. It won't be easy. Because of a fairly reliable piece of news, the Count sent hunters to capture the manticore, but they were all destroyed by that monster. Ruda was unexpectedly determined. I prepare my mind. Monty asked back. Have you ever hunted a manticore? He answered in a deep voice. A few times in my youth. She continued, turning to Ian. And you? He was a bit surprised. Me? Monty's eyes narrowed dangerously. Taught by Arides. You must be a skilled mage by now, right? A suggestion was put forward by her. Why not contribute some wisdom to the Night Order? A memory suddenly flooded into Ian's mind. What a mage should do. Someone's voice resonated. That's right. Every mage will have times when they have to interact with others, even if they don't want to. Arides smiled slightly and advised. You must never take that moment lightly. Arides smiled slightly and advised. You must never take that moment lightly. Because the Magic Association, an organization founded by mages and led by the Magic Academy, ensures the proper use of the arcane. The more he thought about it, the more difficult Ian felt it was. If so, I won't have the face to meet my master, and I might not be able to ask other mages for help when needed. He glanced at the group of people beside him. Every one of them put their trust in Ian. So be it. So he quickly made his decision. I will go with you. The next day, the forest was somewhat quiet. Ruda and Ian led the group deep inside. The atmosphere was a bit tense. Lucy must be waiting. I hope she's okay. Just then, Oberon flapped his wings and flew back to report. Master, I found it. It landed on his shoulder and added, The manticore is over there. Ruda nearby was slightly worried. What's wrong? Ian pointed at Oberon before answering. According to this guy, it's this way. At this moment, Ruda looked at it with different eyes. The ability is truly amazing. As for him, he glanced at Oberon while it chirped. When it landed on my shoulder, I got it used to human language, thanks to necromancy and summoning magic. It all happened in the blink of an eye. They continued to follow the path Oberon had indicated. I sensed very strong murderous intent. Suddenly, Ian asked curiously, Elder, can I ask you something? He answered casually, What is it? The question was quickly raised by him. If the manticore is also a monster, Ian frowned and paused for a beat. Can I persuade it? After thinking for a moment, Ruda only replied with 2 words, hard to say. Mani added, the manticore isn't the type that can talk. He mockingly stiffened his face. What does Mani know about summoning magic? She was so angry she jumped up. I do understand what the arcane is, you know. So Mani was given a scare. If you really can persuade it, I'll tell Arides. However, this statement went against natural logic. Not praising me, but reporting to my master? Just then, Dick Try called out loudly, Master! On the other side, the whole group looked in one direction. What struck their eyes was the murderous intent from the glowing eyes of the manticore. Over there, Ruda and everyone else were looking deep into the forest. It was looking this way. Ruda continued to advise, you two stay by my side at all times. Mani quickly replied, okay. Suddenly, someone called out, making Ruda turn sharply. Master! A soldier stepped forward to inform him. I have coated all the weapons in poison. That person then handed over 3 arrows drenched in the poison Mani had concocted. The very next second, Ruda decisively fired 3 arrows deep into the forest. Good. Ian watched this scene, suddenly falling silent, not knowing what he was thinking. The arrows were flying swiftly forward. Suddenly, Ian felt a stinging sensation throughout his body, his eyes turning white. The arrows hit the manticore's body and bounced right back. Ian stepped up to report. The arrow hit its neck and bounced off. Ruda said, bewildered, impossible. The soldier asked in panic, Master, what should we do? The shadow manticore stepped out, eyes glowing brightly, and laughed. Attack again. Ian looked at the guy and felt a sense of fear rise in his heart. That laughter gave me goosebumps. At this moment, he realized the manticore was right in front of him. No time to recoat the poison. Ian clenched his fists. Looks like there's no other way. The very next second, he suddenly became fierce, his mouth roaring aggressively. Everyone standing behind was stunned, not yet understanding what was happening. Mani looked at Ian's back and exclaimed, that kid actually pulled it off. Before everyone's eyes, the manticore instinctively stood silent. A moment later, it slowly stepped forward and offered a compliment. I didn't expect a human would dare to chat with me. That's rare. Hearing that, Ian tensed up and told himself, all right, stay calm like before. He reached out and said, it's lucky you can understand me. I am Ian, a mage. But the manticore scolded him bluntly, get lost. This remark left Ian dazed, his whole body turning numb. The very next second, the manticore didn't show any respect and threw feces on Ian's head. Eat it, you stupid human. Ian froze, his face darkened. He couldn't help but speak up. What's this? You. The manticore nodded. That's more like it. Drop that respectful tone. It furrowed its brows and growled. What do you want from me? Ian also became tense. The manticore continued to speak directly. At this point, Ian didn't hesitate to point at him and say, your scalp. Then, only the manticore's excited laughter echoed deep in the forest. Looking at Ian's dazed expression, it admiringly praised, you're straightforward. I like that. The next second, it showed its sharp teeth and suggested, Mage Ian, why don't you cooperate with me and check out the corpses of these humans? This remark left Ian shocked, his eyes wide. What? The manticore sank into bloodthirsty delusions. I'll enjoy the meat. It painted a pleasurable scene for Ian, and you will have gold, silver, and women. The manticore said coldly, when you get bored of the women, I'll kill them. Finishing its sentence, it licked its lips in disgust. It will be very interesting. Hearing that, Ian was speechless. Really? After that, he contemptuously spat at the manticore's feet, finding it disgusting. Not stopping there, Ian even gave the middle finger in front of the manticore. You bastard. The soldiers who witnessed this were equally confused. At this moment, the manticore stood up straight and said coldly, all right then. Because of this, in an instant, it lunged straight at Ian. The manticore flew into a rage and roared violently. Killing you is more worth it. Ian suddenly froze, only catching the imperial language. At this moment, Monty Campbell ordered them to rise. She stomped her feet on the ground, and a glowing plant shoot immediately emerged. In an instant, sturdy tree branches quickly reached out from the sprout, encircling the manticore. Ruda's eyes narrowed as he observed. After a moment, he saw it swallowed by those sturdy branches. Seeing that, Ruda shouted anxiously, "Mani, what have you done?" Mani replied nonchalantly, "Are you blind? I already ate the manticore." Ruda continued to question, and the knights, standing nearby too. Although a bit bewildered, Mani stubbornly said, "Get serious. You're not a child anymore. Deal with it yourself. Killing and eating the manticore is the priority." Suddenly, Ruda saw something that made him look up in shock. He started moving his feet, then Ruda ran straight inside. Ian called after him, confused, "Elder, wait." Ruda ran to the place and asked anxiously, "Hey, is everyone all right?" Ian also arrived just in time, drenched in sweat. "Master," the soldier stammered, "we're fine." But suddenly, Ian's eyes widened in panic. Dictry was lying on the ground with a body full of wounds, bandages everywhere. The soldiers continued. "Personally, it was..." Ruda came to help him up. Dictry struggled to say each word. "I'm sorry, Master. We let the manticore escape." But Ruda scolded, "What are you talking about?" The scene moved Ian, his lips pressed tight, his hands suddenly clenching. Ruda's encouragement echoed once more. "You've all done your best." Ian recalled Dictry's honorable moments, sighing to himself. He never thought he'd witness a death, let alone Dictry's. Now, he truly felt it. He envisioned the beasts running rampant in his mind. This was a world where monsters and warriors were an everyday occurrence. They left everything submerged in a sea of fire. The death he once only saw in stories had become a grim reality before his eyes. After thinking for a long while, Ian walked quickly toward the others. He sat down, took hold of Dictry's hand, and called out softly, "Dictry." Ian wore a warm smile, recalling the words from years ago. "You told me this when you taught the scriptures, didn't you?" Beneath the vast blue sky, Dictry's words continued to rise and fall. "Believe with your heart and pray for the heavens to open." Hearing these words, tears streamed down his cheeks. Yes. A moment later, they were surrounded by mystical light. "Let us pray together." Ian's eyes drooped slightly, whispering, "Almighty Heaven, are you watching?" Sitting beside Dictry, he continued to mutter, "Your most ardent believer is here. He's about to die. Aren't you going to do something?" Suddenly, a brilliant ray of light appeared and spoke. "Your heaven is right here, Ian." Before Ian could make sense of it, the heaven continued to offer, "If that's what Ian wants, let me try once." In an instant, the ray of light in the sky became dazzling across the horizon. Seeing this, Ruda smiled and called out, "Ian." Ian had already let go of Dictry's hand. Ruda's voice hesitated. As the blue light gradually faded, Ian stared in shock at his own glowing palms. A deep, sweet voice entered the man's subconscious. "Wake up, Dictry." A miraculous light enveloped the goddess. She slowly reached out her hand as if to help him up. Dictry's eyes widened in amazement, murmuring that the goddess. His heart was filled with thoughts. "It's so good to see you." But as he felt that, Dictry trembled in disbelief. "Why is the goddess here? Is this the heavenly realm?" She closed her eyes, sensing his anxiety, and softly admonished, "You still have work to do." Dictry jumped up, confused. "Work I have to do?" The goddess reached out her arm in the shimmering light to guide him. "Spread my will further, help the weak, and bring them happiness." Dictry's eyes narrowed in shock at her next words. "And assist my apostle Ian." A blinding light appeared before his eyes, along with a final message. "That is my will." The very next second, Dictry snapped out of his dream. His vision blurred as he realized who was around him. Ruda was the first to notice. He's awake. The others were surprised and quickly called his name. "Dictry, you're awake?" Dictry, covered in blood, woke up in a panic. "Where is this?" Just as he was dazed and confused, a voice drifted from afar. Dictry. Ian, holding his staff, smirked and teased. "How does it feel to return from the dead?" Ian, holding his staff, smirked and teased. "How does it feel to return from the dead?" He knelt at Ian's feet, full of gratitude. "You saved me according to that great one's will, right?" He glanced at the person kneeling, feeling a bit awkward, though Ian couldn't really deny it. Well, he could only use divine magic because the goddess of the heavenly church had lent him her power, so he wasn't entirely wrong. Thus, he nodded in acknowledgement. "How did you know?" The goddess said, I had to save you because you still have a lot of work to do. Dick Dry jolted, remembering her words in his dream. You still have work to do. Dick Dry seemed to realize something unexpected, filled with admiration. He then knelt down at Ian's feet as respectfully as possible. I bow before you. The apostle sent by the goddess. The others found Dick Dry ridiculous. There was no doubt Ian had used magic to save him, but calling him the goddess's apostle was probably just a hallucination. They would have to keep an eye on him. But everyone also felt a sense of relief, their hearts finally at peace. Mani stood with her hands on her hips, unexpectedly chiming in, everyone was nearly dead and you're still using your energy. After regaining their composure, Ruda rallied the team. All right, let's continue hunting the manticore. The whole group was fired up. Understood. Ian also started mapping out a different plan with his pet crow. I'll have Oberon go ahead and scout. He said, sounding slightly worried. Is it okay? It might be in danger. After the crow took flight into the blue sky, he quietly replied with one word. No. Ruda truly didn't understand his intentions. Thinking of the manticore's dangerous face, Ian became even more determined. He looked at everyone with a serious expression. I know that thing isn't just ordinary trash, so we have to beat it to a pulp. In the town, everywhere were pathetic screams and piles of rubble. The manticore attacked a village, scaring the citizens to death. A monster. The people panicked and ran from all directions. A young man was holding his father's hand when he suddenly fell backward. Roland looked back in horror, shouting, Father! But he couldn't do anything. The manticore was already standing just a few steps away from his father. Without a second's hesitation, he raised a rake toward the beast, threatening, Get out of this town! Although Roland tried to steady himself, his entire body was shaking uncontrollably. You monster! The manticore sneered disdainfully. So this human is your father. Roland was even more terrified. How can you speak human language? Its hoarse voice rang out, full of defiance. I'll make a good offer. Kill your father and bring him to me. If you do that, I'll spare the rest of the humans. Roland trembled more and more, but he didn't agree to such an absurd request. Do you think I'd agree to that? The manticore wore a twisted smile. Then there's no other way. It roared loudly, thrusting its claws forward. Die. In the critical moment, he used his body to shield Bastion. Father! Before the crucial moment, an arrow whistled through the air. Blood began to pour from the manticore's body, a new wound clearly visible. Ruda appeared just in time. He arrived and immediately clashed with the manticore to prevent it from harming any more innocent lives. The father and son looked up in confusion. The Santiago Knights. Ruda looked at the men behind him and shouted with authority, Prepare for battle. The group began to form a formation, targeting the monster in the center. Even with one eye injured, the manticore's fighting power remained fierce. It bared its teeth in frustration. Do you animals want to die that badly? Ian appeared in the meadow where the sunlight shone on him. Smirking, what a pathetic fool. Ian's gaze was full of contempt. Struggling in vain, even at this point. The manticore, taunted, lost its cool. Shut up, mage. But he still treated it like nothing more than a thorn in his side. Is that just the barking of a loser? All talk and no action. He successfully provoked the manticore, causing it to turn and charge at him. Insolent, saying that it charged headlong at the opponent. All of this was in Ian's calculations. The manticore was still furiously rushing forward. Just at the close proximity, Monty Campbell stood in front of Ian. She muttered a few spells. Oh, growth-giving flora! The grass suddenly moved and grew tall. Both sides of the manticore were suddenly bound by vines forming a sturdy rope. What is this? Ruda and his troops seized this opportunity to attack. Now the soldiers began to reach for their weapons, preparing to fight. They quickly unleashed attacks aimed at the manticore's body. It roared and struggled, knowing only a few cheap tricks. Ian's gaze was cold as he looked at the enemy. He snapped his fingers and pointed his staff forward. Fire! In the manticore's eyes, there was no longer arrogance, but instead, shock bordering on terror. Burn! A flame suddenly erupted, incinerating the manticore from within. Finally, only a terrified scream echoed in the evening wind. Ian looked proudly at the fire, now only smoldering in a pile of ashes. After the fire, the town returned to its accustomed peace. The residents, without a word, bowed in unison. Thank you very much. The knights, Ruta replied politely on their behalf. We only did what we should have. Meanwhile, Ian stood watching him sparkle in the limelight with a strange look. Oberon whispered into his ear, Master, have you been sidelined? Ian was so angry he barked in a low voice. Shut up. Actually, he already had a vague answer in his heart. Maybe they were afraid of him because he had turned the manticore into a fireball. But just then, footsteps brought Ian back to reality. Roland and his father approached and spoke with great respect. Mage, thank you for saving us. Ian was rendered speechless by this situation, his heart swirling with confusion. He didn't do it because he wanted to be thanked. He didn't hesitate to pour out a long string of flowery words. You're truly impressive. We only caught the manticore because of you. Caught off guard by the kindness, Ian could only clumsily respond with a template answer. I just did as Monty said. Seeing the person who was old enough to be his father acting so subservient, Ian became even more flustered. Please, lift your head. His tone caught Ruta off guard. It was rare to see someone with such incredible ability who had a personality like that. He stared intensely at Ian's face, inwardly deciding. Someone like him might become a big figure who would make even the nobility feel ashamed. Just then, the sound of urgent footsteps drew closer. The group of soldiers turned to the two Ians and questioned, Are you the ones who caught the manticore? Ruta didn't hesitate to admit it. That's right. And one of them quickly chimed in. Apologies for the late introduction. We are knights belonging to the castle. Ian's curiosity was piqued by this term. Castle. The other person gestured to him while speaking. Yes, if you don't mind, please come with us. Count Katina has requested to invite you to the castle. As the group was illuminated by the chandelier, they heard a melodious voice in their ears. Welcome, brave warriors. I never expected you to stand up against a monster in the name of the heavens. Katina swirled his wine glass, excitedly reciting a series of formalities. Truly righteous souls. Ruta shyly raised his glass and politely declined. No, it's not to that extent. Katina immediately sighed in return. What a pity. He turned toward the group, eating and drinking, making a snide remark. If only this castle had knights like you. Saying that, Katina quickly shifted his focus to another major figure. That's right, Mage Monty. You can rest assured, I won't let those priests touch the forest where you live. She got the assurance, so she shouted clearly, Of course. After beating around the bush, Katina also turned toward the main character. Furthermore, Mage Ian, I've heard about you from my niece. But before he finished his sentence, he was choked up by the sight of the boy eating like he was a refugee from 45. Only when Oberon couldn't stand it anymore and whispered a reminder did Ian stop. The other person is calling the master. He instinctively blurted out, What? The nonchalant attitude froze Katina on the spot. He dared to show such an attitude toward him. Catching the unpleasant vibe from him, Ian's eyes flashed slightly. He quickly improvised before the atmosphere got worse. Sorry, the food is so good I didn't hear you. I was just replying to the crow. Only then was Katina satisfied, wearing a forced smile. I understand. He followed the momentum to restart his record player. I heard you took care of my niece. As soon as he finished, his attendant had already blinded Ian with a dazzling chest. He stammered before he could say a word. But looking inside, it was clear he already had the answer in his heart. A gold magic book. Detailed usage instructions ran through Ian's head. Just tear it in half, and the magic inside would immediately trigger. He carefully lifted it to admire it, and the more he looked, the more his mind spun. Surprisingly, he could feel the high quality in every word. Katina waited for Ian to recover before excitedly showing off. How is it? Do you like it? I prepared it especially for you. Ian didn't hesitate to hug the treasure and reply. Thank you for such a precious gift. He generously went along with it. It's nothing. Katina rubbed his thumb and index finger together and continued to express. You brought Lucy back safely. Compared to that, this is nothing. Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly snapped his fingers. The door, as if by magic, pulled open a small gap. Lucy walked in, looking incredibly glamorous under the gaze of dozens of eyes. Only Ian spoiled it by stifling a laugh, feeling like he was complaining inwardly. What's with that hat? The closer he looked, the more he felt his aesthetic sense was being trampled. Suddenly, Lucy cleared her throat to gather momentum. The next second, she blushed and asked an extremely bland question. Long time no see. Are you doing well? Ian replied even more blandly. Yeah, long time no see. Ruta caught a whiff of romance, so he opened his mouth to tease. So it's not a sister, but a lover? Ian quickly grabbed his wine glass to clear the awkwardness. It's not like that. There's a bit of a situation. Katina wouldn't give him any time to recover and immediately called out. Ian, I have a proposal for you. He mechanically looked up and asked, what is it? He glanced at Lucy and calmly blurted out, in the journey of revenge for my niece, can you lend me your strength? Only then did Ian realize. It's true that the only free things that fall from the sky are rain and bird droppings. So that's why he gave the gold book. He didn't have to risk his life on the battlefield either. Ian stabilized himself extremely quickly and started doing the math. He only needed to provide moderate support with magic like he did when dealing with the Manticore. If it went well, he could even get double the reward from both the Count and Lucy. Since there was a profit, Ian wasn't stupid enough to refuse. If you need the help of a humble mage like me, he looked up and declared very clearly, I will accompany you. 3 days later, voices echoed outside the castle. My uncle is very sorry he couldn't see you off because he had to prepare for the expedition. It's fine. Lucy, though reassured, still politely promised. Whenever you return to the Terrian territory, I will host you myself. Ruta solemnly took her hand and replied, I'm really looking forward to it. Ian stood by, silently thinking about the transaction that had taken place. The number of knights had decreased significantly after being dispatched by the Count. Suddenly, Ruta spoke, pulling him back to the present. Ian, thank you for everything. He turned his attention to him and replied, same here. Ruta seized the opportunity to hint subtly. When you have time, come to Trifar Island. I'll introduce you to some mysteries you might find interesting. Just by dropping the hint. Ian looked very interested. Trifar Island. He confidently explained in more detail. It's an island floating on the Coral Sea. Just say you're coming to see Ruta, and everyone will surely welcome you. Ian blurted out in surprise. Is that actually your real name? He easily admitted. It's okay to tell you. Suddenly, he placed a hand on his chest and introduced himself solemnly. My name is Salvador of the Argus family. Lucy's eyes widened to their limit as she repeated, Salvador of Argus. She stammered and confirmed one more time. It can't be Salvador of the White Wolf. He felt shy about her enthusiasm and brushed it off. No need to remember the name of an old man. Ian hadn't caught the frequency, so he asked very naively, White Wolf? Lucy looked at him like he was a moron and scolded. You don't know? The White Wolf mercenary group was once prosperous under the former emperor. As for their leader, the emperor at the time bestowed upon him the title of Supreme Swordmaster. Lucy suddenly pointed forward and exclaimed in confusion. So this person is... Salvador scratched his face shyly when she stated his profession, a swordmaster. Ian saw she was so surprised and wondered, what kind of reaction is that? Lucy suddenly shouted, that's a legend, a living legend. Seeing that, he just nodded faintly. Yeah, legend. Salvador then burst into laughter. Just like you. Ian heard this and was stunned. What do you mean? An image appeared in Salvador's head. I will be the one who defeats the swordmaster. Thinking that, he smiled and looked at Ian. Forget it. Then we shall take our leave here. I was standing there and took the opportunity to warn. Send my regards to Arides. Thank you for everything. Suddenly Julian burst into tears and gripped his hand. We must meet again. Ian was helplessly pensive. It's not like it's a permanent farewell. Suddenly Salvador called out loudly, Ian. He then grabbed Ian's hand. He saw that and also politely looked at Salvador. When everything is settled, I'll come to Trifar Island. Salvador followed up with a radiant face. By that time, we will surely meet again. After that, the two sides parted ways. Before that day comes, take care. Just then, on Katina's side, he slowly walked up to the podium, but Katina's face couldn't hide his thoughtfulness. He mindlessly remembered Lucy at that time had knelt on the ground, crying and begging, Uncle, please punish the one who killed Mother. Katina thought to this point. His eyes hardened, radiating an indescribable murderous aura, daring to kill my sister, and even planning to hold a wedding with Lucy. However, for the Katina territory, This situation wasn't necessarily bad. Use Lucy as a shield to secure the territory, then marry her off to one of my subordinates. The Tarian territory will fall into my hands. Katina, deep in his eyes, showed extreme hatred. Returning to Ian's side, he stared intently at Lucy's radiant appearance. In the future, after everything ends, I'll try talking to Lucy. Katina stood on the podium with intense determination. I, in the name of the laws of this land, will pass judgment on those who abuse their power. The soldiers below also shouted in unison, "Long live the Count!" Katina was even more determined now. "All of you, follow me." The soldiers quickly took the order. Yes. Night had fallen at the campsite. In the kitchen area, Ian was busy doing something. Lucy and two soldiers sitting nearby wondered. "Ian, what are you doing?" He stared fixedly at the pot of boiling water. "I'm boiling the spoon." Lucy heard it, and thoughts appeared in her head. Why? Planning to boil it and eat it right away? Suddenly, two soldiers whispered from afar. "Heard the mage is cooking soup. Stay away." He heard them and cursed to himself. "Idiots, I'm sterilizing it." Lucy, sitting nearby, heard and was bewildered. Sterilizing. Seeing her look so bewildered, Ian explained, roughly like mystery. "You wouldn't understand if I explained it." The two soldiers were even more surprised than Lucy. Mystery. Suddenly, a moment later, a call came from behind Ian. "Mage." Two soldiers approached shyly. "Can you boil this for us too?" Ian saw their behavior and was furious. "I told you it wasn't soup." At night, the whole camp was living happily together, when suddenly Lucy exhaled, "Hey, Ian, I'm thinking about something." Ian heard that and frowned at her. "What is it?" Lucy glanced at him. "The reward you were promised." Hearing this, Ian remembered. "That's right." Lucy looked at Ian seriously. "I intended to give you gold, but you're probably bored with that, right?" Lucy had just finished speaking, and Ian's eyes widened in horror. Lucy said with a smile, "So I've been thinking for a long time about what might satisfy you. And the result was..." He looked suspiciously. Lucy then told him about the magic sword Enrollment. It's a gift the ancient people gave to the first Tarian baron. Legend has it that the baron fell in love with a fairy and held that sword to become the savior of the fairy realm. Legend has it that the baron fell in love with a fairy and held that sword to become the savior of the fairy realm. He frowned at Lucy. If Tarian has such a powerful magic sword, why is it still just a barony? She immediately refuted. That was 400 years ago. Ian asked indifferently, "So what?" "So..." Lucy smiled shyly. "Enrollment is buried in the grave of the first baron. So to get it, the grave has to be dug up." Ian's eyes went wide, and his mouth hung open, his face unable to hide his shock. The descendant goes and digs up the thing their ancestor buried with their own hands, just to give it to someone else? Ian's face went pale as he looked at Lucy. "So your ancestral grave is a time capsule?" Lucy, caught off guard by such a question, was confused. "What do you mean?" Ian asked out of curiosity. "I don't quite understand. But it's a magic sword, right? And it looks valuable. Shouldn't it be better for your family to use it? That's better than just letting it be a baron's trophy forever, isn't it?" Lucy pouted at Ian. "I haven't received anything yet, but thanks to you, I've gained a right to fight, and I'm very grateful for that." As she spoke, she clenched her hands together. "It's valuable enough that I want to give it to you as a testament to my gratitude." Lucy stood up abruptly. "That's why I said I would give you that precious item." She was so angry she turned her back and walked away. "You idiot." Ian, seeing her run off, panicked. Lucy, he was left behind, silently watching her back. Perhaps I went too far. Just then, someone approached. "Mage, the Count has a favor to ask of you." The night grew late, and from a corner of the camp, shouting broke out. "If you don't want to be hung, get lost. You damn thieves." One person, with an arrogant and challenging expression, said, "That's what we should be saying. Just hand over 3 chickens, and we'll leave you alone." Immediately, Helmet pressed close to the man. "We have to go fight. You understand? If we're hungry out here, where would we get the strength, right?" Suddenly, the man's face turned pale. He pointed frantically up at the canopy. "Isn't that crow the same kind the mage keeps?" Helmet stared thoughtfully at it. The man, along with Helmet, went pale. "What the hell? The damn crow can talk." Immediately, a voice called out from behind the 3 of them. "Hey!" Making the faces of the group turn green with fear as they turned around. Ian walked over, frowning as he looked at the three standing before him. "What the hell are you guys doing?" Under the flickering candlelight inside the tent, Katina spoke up first with a serious expression. "Ian, I have a favor to ask." He kept his usual calm as he asked, "What is it?" He coughed a few times, looking extremely hesitant. Ian looked at him and wondered. "He looks like he's having trouble speaking. What on earth is it?" After a moment of deliberation, Katina decided to speak up. "I want you to stop the misconduct of the mercenaries in this town." Ian was surprised for a moment and asked, "Aren't the knights better suited for that?" He rubbed his fingers together and slowly explained, "Because knights and mercenaries are cohorts. They often hide each other's sins and turn a blind eye. Naturally, that's to maintain the morale of the mercenaries. I could have tolerated a certain level of looting, but this is my niece's territory. I'm counting on you. As long as you give them a warning, the mercenaries will know their limits." Looking at Ian's dark expression, the soldiers huddled together, shivering. He questioned them coldly, daring to break into people's homes like thieves and robbers. Oberon, standing on his shoulder, added, "Punishment." Ian slammed his staff on the ground as a warning. "I will deal with you to set an example." Oberon excitedly chimed in, "Punishment." The three of them hurriedly apologized. "Sorry, mage. I will reform." After that, Ian and Oberon only had to catch a few, and the rest were so scared they didn't dare show their faces. The mercenaries all hid in their houses, trembling and muttering, "If we go out now, we're done for." The Count and Lucy were overjoyed when they heard the news, but Bruno knelt solemnly to report, "Count, we have a serious problem. The result is an unexpected complication." Bruno continued to explain, "Against the abusers of power, our troops are no longer a threat." Ian immediately asked back, "Even though we have over 400 soldiers?" He lowered his head and explained, "Because our army is completely harmless." He repeated it with confusion, "Harmless." If the army were looting the territory, the people here would have pressured Graham to stop the invasion long ago, because Graham is controlling the Terrian territory. But thanks to our peaceful march, Graham has had time to gather his forces. Not to mention that because our troops cannot act freely, morale has also declined significantly. Ian cupped his chin and thought, "It has truly become a bizarre situation." Bruno looked up, his voice full of hesitation. "Lord, do you give us permission to start looting now?" Katina rubbed his temples wearily. He slowly looked at Ian, asking for his opinion. "Mage, don't you have any plan to deal with this situation?" Lucy, beside him, also looked at him with worried eyes. Ian's gaze became sharper. He cupped his chin and thought for a few seconds before speaking slowly. "It's not completely hopeless right now." Katina's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly asked, "What way?" "Speak quickly." Lucy, with an admiring look, praised him. "That's Ian for you." Contrary to the two of them, a few soldiers standing behind showed clear discomfort. Lucas whispered, "This mage is so arrogant." Somewhere in the Terrian territory, Henrik shoved the door open hard, scolding irritably, "So noisy, you annoying crow." Ian's face was magnified before his eyes, making him jump and scream. Henrik backed away a few steps, hesitatingly asking, "Who are you?" Ian didn't answer but asked back, "Are you the owner of this wheat field?" He hadn't recovered yet, his voice trembling with panic. "I asked who you are." A soldier behind him impatiently interrupted, "Hey, this is the disciple of the Archmage Arides, Lord Ian Arides Raven." Hearing that name, Henrik's face immediately darkened. He panicked and knelt on the ground to beg. "I never expected such a famous person. Please forgive my earlier rudeness." Ian glanced at him, gritting his teeth as he announced, "The wheat here has all rotted." Henrik looked up in confusion. "What do you mean by that?" Ian slammed his staff on the ground and shouted, "Can't you feel it? The evil energy has seeped into this field. The soul of the first Baron of Terrian, who was unfairly robbed of his territory, is furious." He trembled, tears streaming down, and asked anxiously, "Then what should I do?" Ian tapped his staff on the ground, frowning and warning, "Wait a moment. Be quiet." Suddenly, his eyes widened. Ian raised his hand to the sky and said dramatically, "The heavens are speaking. As long as Lucy Terrian inherits the barony, the fury will subside. That is how it is. Oh my, over there is also some ominous evil energy." As soon as he finished, he ran off, and the soldiers hurriedly called out in pursuit, Mage, he shouted as he walked. I never thought the territory would decline because of such power-abusing people. After a while, perhaps the rumor I spread has taken effect. The people of Tarion began to feel dissatisfied with Graham. They demanded Lucy succeed him to escape the calamity. The people constantly threw tomatoes in front of his door. Thanks to that, the Count's army's morale soared, and they marched straight toward where Graham was. Amidst that joyful atmosphere, Lucas stood from afar, looking at him with dissatisfaction. At the camp, he stood up to protest. Count, we don't want to stand on a disgraced battlefield. Katina asked in confusion, What do you mean? Lucas immediately accused him. Ian is spreading rumors that the territory is cursed. He is bringing disaster to us. If we continue to stay with such a mage, our honor will fall into the mud. He is bringing disaster to us. If we continue to stay with such a mage, our honor will fall into the mud. The group collectively retorted more fiercely. We can't believe anything the mage says. That's right, he's surely trying to deceive us. He silently watched the scene, his eyes gradually darkening as he understood the problem. In other words, because they had no way to distinguish truth from falsehood, they assumed everything he said was fake. How tiresome. But the main force of war is the knights. The Count's expression also showed he understood that. Without knights, they couldn't form a formation, and in the end, they could only listen to them. In this situation, do I still need to stay? Looking at Katina's hesitant face, Ian finally took the initiative. You don't need to worry, Count. He stood up and called after Ian. He turned to leave, but didn't forget to emphasize, if my existence makes everyone this uncomfortable, I will leave. But for now on, no matter what happens, don't even think about asking for my help. Lucy frantically rushed out of the command tent, calling out for Ian to wait for her as she ran. Gasping for air with teary eyes, she apologized for her terrible attitude and ingratitude from the night before. Lucy explained just how helpless her uncle had felt under the crushing pressure from the army generals. Seeing her genuine distress, the irritation in Ian's heart vanished instantly, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. With a calm expression, Ian reassured her that he held no grudges at all. He smiled gently, viewing the battlefield as nothing more than a bleak place full of death, and he was glad to be leaving it. Lucy remained deeply worried, fearing that leaving would cost Ian the glory and military merit he deserved. The young mage just smiled. His intentions were far more personal than political fame. He reached out and gently patted Lucy's head to soothe her anxiety. Ian warmly said that he only cared about the legendary longsword she had originally promised to give him. Lucy's eyes immediately lit up with intense admiration and infatuation. Overwhelmed, Lucy frantically promised to give him the sword and desperately reached out to propose marriage. This made the sweating mage panic and refuse immediately. Even though Lucy begged pathetically and humorously demanded he accept her in her territory, Ian firmly refused as they both left the camp. A few days later, a massive army was marching majestically under the scorching sun. The thunderous sound of hooves echoed across the vast valley as the force advanced. The ruthless Captain Graham confidently mocked the enemy's numbers, completely unfazed by his opponents. A savage, bloodthirsty light shone in Graham's orange eyes. He spotted Lucy in the distance and smirked at her foolish decision to ally with the Count. He gloated as he imagined crushing Lucy in his palm, planning to claim her as a prize after winning the battle. Graham bragged about his secret weapon, the legendary Black Knight from the Eastern Empire, who was ready to slaughter. The tyrannical captain grinned, completely certain of an absolute victory. A scout suddenly galloped up to report that the enemy had officially appeared. Graham aggressively drew his sword, declaring that numbers meant nothing to him. He raised his weapon, rallying his troops with a bloodthirsty oath to cut down anyone who stood in their way. With a battle cry, Graham's vanguard charged straight down the grassy hillside. The two armies collided violently amidst the chaotic flash of clashing steel on horseback. On the command hill, Count Katina stood watching the battle, surrounded by his personal bodyguards. The brown-haired knight confidently reported that their side held a clear tactical advantage. Ian observed the progress of the fight, predicting a quick and easy victory thanks to their numerical superiority. Suddenly, The mage's eyes widened in horror when a terrifying presence appeared on the battlefield. The mysterious Black Knight unleashed an incredibly fast and brutal attack, slicing an allied soldier in half. The brown-haired knight gravely informed Ian about the terrifying origins of this monster warrior. He recounted the legendary background of the Black Knight from the Frozen Lands. This left Ian confused, wondering why such a powerhouse had appeared here. The foreign warrior easily slaughtered the allied soldiers, leaving a trail of gore and absolute terror behind. With just one massive swing of his sword, the Black Knight wiped out an entire cavalry squad. Cold sweat broke out on Ian's face as he realized that this single monster variable was enough to destroy their entire campaign. The battle fell into a dangerous equilibrium as the Allied center began to collapse under the pressure. A sense of unease surged. Ian realized the situation was about to take a turn for the worse. Breaking out in a cold sweat, Lord Decade warned Ian about the disaster that would occur if the center line broke. The brave knight looked out with horror, realizing they were the next targets in this torrent of slaughter. At headquarters, Lucy and her guards watched in terror as the front line completely broke. They realized that if the center was broken, the enemy would ignore the fleeing soldiers and aim straight for the Count. The Count roared in fury, while his guards panicked and begged him to calm down. Under immense pressure, the panicked commander prepared to make a final, desperate tactical decision. Ian's heart sank when he learned Lord Decade had been assigned to a suicide mission. A painful memory surfaced. Lord Decade was the only one who had ever treated Ian with genuine respect. Knowing full well this hopeless order was a death sentence, Ian frantically looked for another way. Lord Decade steadfastly placed his hand on his sword hilt, ready to meet his tragic fate. With absolute loyalty, the seasoned knight accepted his final order to sacrifice himself for the kingdom. Lord Decade solemnly declared it his duty to obey the Count's order and halt the enemy's advance. Ian pointed out the absolute futility of facing an unstoppable monster threat. He desperately pleaded with the knight to ignore the stupid order and retreat with the Count. Lord Decade acknowledged the harsh truth, but Ian still vehemently opposed such senseless, outdated sacrifice. Raising his staff, Ian argued passionately that throwing away lives wasn't a real strategy. Frustrated by the tragic reality, Ian lamented a world that always demanded the death of its most upright men. Suddenly, a panicked messenger galloped up with an urgent report directly for Lord Decade. Looking closely, Ian's eyes widened as he recognized the knight who had just arrived, the one who had fled his post. Sir Silk shamelessly announced that the entire army had been defeated and that he would retreat immediately. Disgusted by the man's cowardly lack of honor, Ian listened as Lord Decade advised him to follow the noble. The selfless knight calmly decided to stay behind alone, using his own life to buy time for the others. With a battle cry, Lord Decade charged back into the chaos of the battlefield. Ian watched the knights retreating back, his heart filled with questions about the morality of this sacrifice. Standing amidst the cowards, Ian realized he could not let the kingdom's only true knight die such a shameful death. Looking at the fleeing nobles, Ian decided he wouldn't let a brave man be sacrificed for their stupidity. Lucy begged Ian to turn back and retreat with them before the enemy surrounded them. Ignoring her pleas, the young mage quickly mounted his horse, ready to charge into danger. Ian loudly ordered Lucy to run with the cowards while he charged straight back to the front line. Lucy was stunned with horror when the young mage declared he would join Lord Decade in the final battle. With a confident and reassuring smile, Ian told her to stay alive, then spurred his horse into the melee. The thunder of hooves echoed as he galloped toward the battlefield, while Lucy helplessly called after him in absolute terror. A storm of war was shifting as the final clash drew near. While galloping on the dusty path, Lord Decade was startled to hear a familiar voice calling his name. He looked back in utter shock as Ian caught up, promising to lure the enemy in a different direction. The knight demanded he go back to protect the Count, but Ian adamantly refused, unwilling to let him fight alone. With sharp and powerful eyes, the young mage proudly reminded the knight of his magical power. Ian smiled confidently, reassuring him that he was fully capable of protecting himself. Looking deep into his eyes, Lord Decade was amazed by the massive and clear power radiating from the boy. Lord Decade smiled with relief just as the roar of the chasing enemy vanguard echoed through the hills. The enemy cavalry charged ruthlessly at terrifying speed, determined to crush all resistance. Trusting the young mage's plan, Lord Decade prepared to split up to coordinate a counterattack. Ian told him to stay safe as they split the enemy's attention. Turning back, Ian observed the pursuing force and prepared to execute his dangerous scheme. A deadly arrow grazed Ian, exploding violently into a massive tree nearby. His companion Raven began to panic as certain death approached, causing the mage to irritably scold it. With the enemy closing in, a cunning glint flashed in Ian's eyes as he led them deep into the dark forest. As the jaws of the deadly trap closed, the pursuers roared bloodthirstily, chasing the young mage deep into the woods. A gloomy mist immediately swallowed the forest path, signaling that the dark magic trap was about to be triggered. The heavily armored cavalry stopped their horses, splitting up to search the dense forest, certain that the target was cornered. Suddenly, a scout spotted the silhouette of a cloaked rider holding a mysterious glowing object in the dim shadows ahead. Safely hidden under his hood, Ian smiled coldly as he prepared his spell trap and opened a high-level magic scroll. With a quick and decisive motion, the young mage tore the scroll, unleashing the destructive power of magic. A terrifying blue bolt of lightning struck down from the sky, completely leveling the forest clearing. The pursuers screamed in absolute agony as the electrical shockwave exploded, knocking them from their saddles in a blinding blast. Silence returned to the smoking clearing. Ian calmly rode away, leaving the defeated soldiers lying flat on the scorched earth. Taking a deep breath, the blue-cloaked mage sighed with relief as his companion Raven watched, satisfied that the trap had successfully thinned the enemy forces. However, a cold worry still lingered in Ian's heart. He was anxious about whether Lord Decade had successfully protected the Count during the retreat. Unbeknownst to him, a mysterious knight in black armor stood silently watching him from behind a massive tree before turning away to investigate. The silent observer slipped back into the deep darkness, continuing to track the mage's movements. Meanwhile, the desperate retreat of Count Katina's group was blocked as their horses raced through the dense forest under the gloomy canopy. A hostile ambush team suddenly blocked their path, and the enemy scouts eagerly declared they had found the fleeing Count. The mustached Count gasped in absolute horror, completely blindsided by the sudden appearance of the enemy vanguard. Without a moment's hesitation, an enemy crossbowman roared an order to fire. He unleashed a deadly arrow aimed at the fleeing nobles. An arrow pierced the Count's shoulder armor, spraying a fountain of painful blood. The powerful impact knocked the wounded Count from his horse as the panicked animal reared up on its hind legs. He fell heavily to the forest floor, completely defenseless as his horse bolted into the darkness. Seeing their commander fall, the Count's remaining loyal guards bravely gathered, forming a desperate defensive circle around him. Steel clashed against steel as a loyal knight aggressively counterattacked to halt the enemy cavalry's advance. Despite his valiant efforts, another guard was brutally cut down while the wounded Count watched the scene in agony. Witnessing the slaughter, Lucy and her last bodyguard watched in horror as their final defense collapsed. The enemy commander smugly aimed his crossbow at the fallen leader, mockingly ordering him to surrender submissively. Gathering every last ounce of strength, the Count stubbornly let out a savage roar, spitting blood. Grasping his blood-stained mace, the brave noble prepared for one last suicide charge to protect his niece. The enemy commander was stunned by the Count's terrifying determination, sweating as he wondered if this dying man was a monster. With a cold motion, he pulled the trigger, the arrow piercing the brave leader's chest. Lucy and the remaining knights screamed in despair as they witnessed the Count take a fatal blow. Falling into his sobbing niece's arms, the dying noble whispered Lucy's name with his final breath. Overcome with grief, Lucy sobbed over her uncle's cold body as the crushing weight of loss hit her. The enemy commander cursed under his breath, realizing they had failed to capture the Count alive as Captain Graham had strictly ordered. Looking at the sobbing noblewoman, He quickly decided he at least had to capture Lucy to salvage the mission. Raising his weapon, the commander ordered the remaining infantry to take the now defenseless girl. The last loyal knight bravely stepped out, swinging his sword and roaring for the enemy to stay back. But he was immediately overwhelmed, taking a fatal slash across his chest and falling in an instant. Lucy watched in horror as her last bodyguard fell to the blood-soaked ground. The enemy soldiers slowly approached her, while Lucy swore desperately that she would rather die than be taken to Graham. Weeping in utter helplessness, Lucy squeezed her eyes shut and begged anyone to save her. Suddenly, a blinding purple light tore through the darkness the moment she called Ian's name. A thick purple mist suddenly erupted throughout the clearing, causing the attacking soldiers to panic. The magical mist completely blinded the enemy, and they screamed in panic that they couldn't see anything. Amidst the chaos, a gloved hand suddenly reached out from the purple shadows and grabbed Lucy's arm. With effortless strength, Ian pulled the panicked girl onto his horse and dashed away in a daring escape. Looking up in utter astonishment, Lucy watched the young mage navigate the horse through the darkness, tears streaming down her face. Feeling his powerful presence, Lucy's heart pounded as she looked at her savior with absolute admiration. So relieved, she blushed when she realized the hero she adored had actually returned to save her. Steering the horse towards safety, Ian urgently asked what had happened to the Count while Lucy was still reeling, trying to regain her composure. A heavy silence hung over the young noblewoman as she recalled her uncle's tragic fate, making Ian realize they were truly alone. Pulling Lucy closer to him on the horse, Ian anxiously asked if she was hurt, receiving her tearful, choked-up thanks in return. Looking up in worry, Lucy desperately asked what was happening and begged for news about Lord Decade. Sweating with concern, Ian said gravely that Lord Decade was likely in trouble when he tried to reach him. Although Lucy was desperate, Ian firmly urged her toward the river to find an escape route. Narrowing his eyes, Ian revealed they had to urgently escape the dangerous pursuer right on their heels. To Lucy's utter horror, the terrifying Black Knight suddenly emerged from the shadows, relentlessly chasing them. The sound of hooves thundered violently, splashing water as the decisive chase rushed down to the river. Trapped between the currents, Ian and Lucy were forced to stop when the terrifying hunter blocked their path ahead. Staring at their pursuer, the young mage realized that if they were caught here, they would surely die. Pointing his sword, the cold mercenary demanded they immediately hand over the young noblewoman. Holding Lucy tight, Ian stood firmly against the knight's threats. Sternly, Ian laughed and asked if the mercenary knew his master was human trash. Recalling painful memories, Lucy's eyes filled with hatred when her enemy was mentioned. Lucy yelled in anger, declaring that the murderous usurper Graham only deserved death. Ian pointed out the villain's crimes and asked if this battle was worth trading a mercenary's soul for. Behind the dark visor, the mercenary paused for a moment before casting aside all moral constraints. With a cold warning, he raised his massive greatsword to force them into compliance. Ian smiled confidently, quietly preparing to trigger a hidden magic trap. Sensing potential danger, the mercenary's horse suddenly panicked, its eyes glowing red. The spooked horse reared up on its hind legs, completely throwing the heavily armored knight from the saddle. Landing heavily on the muddy bank, the formidable hunter was immediately knocked down. As he struggled to stand, the stunned knight angrily asked what kind of tricks the boy had used. Releasing his magic, Ian boisterously commanded the surging river to rise. A massive wall of water roared upward, leaving the helpless knight completely speechless. The fierce floodwater crashed down, completely swallowing the armored warrior into the riverbed. A massive water explosion leveled the riverbank, leaving behind only swirling foam. While Lucy called for Ian, the mage approached the motionless armor to check if he was still alive. Looking closely, Ian suddenly noticed something unexpected. In a humorous moment of distraction, the young mage couldn't help but compliment the extremely cool black armor. Sweating, he quickly refocused, worried that the unconscious enemy might wake up and stab him. Although Lucy was bewildered, Ian decided it was safest to remove the armor immediately. He knelt down, carefully unlatched it, and removed the heavy helmet. When the disguise was removed, Ian and Lucy gasped in astonishment at the face underneath. The helmet fell, revealing a beautiful blonde woman who was unconscious. The scene shifted to late at night, with a warm campfire crackling in the quiet forest. Tied tightly to a tree, the defeated mercenary slowly regained consciousness. Seeing her move, Ian lazily asked if she was awake yet. Sitting comfortably by the fire, the two observed the prisoner along with the confiscated armor. Realizing she had been stripped of her gear, the blonde woman angrily demanded her armor back. Ian rested his chin on his hand, calmly explaining that removing her armor was necessary for safety. Blushing with extreme embarrassment, the prisoner groaned while Lucy skillfully poked fun at her. Lucy smirked, teasing the mercenary for dressing as a man to find a new thrill. Watching the scene, Ian broke into a sweat, realizing Lucy could be very sharp in her speech sometimes. In this fantasy world, cross-dressing is strictly prohibited by law. Compared to modern times, the level of embarrassment was equivalent to being caught wearing a maid outfit. Lucy gleefully threatened to spread ruinous rumors about the identity of the fearsome Black Knight. Comparing it to modern times, the level of embarrassment was equivalent to being caught wearing that. Lucy smirked coldly, asking if a greedy mercenary even knew what honor was. Veins popping with indignation, the tied-up female knight snapped back, leading to a humorous argument. The atmosphere by the campfire became increasingly tense when Ian advised Lucy to calm down, but the young noblewoman tremblingly and vehemently denied being agitated. Overwhelmed by grief and fear, Lucy stood paralyzed, her pent-up emotions almost causing her to collapse. Sensing the deep trauma in her heart, Ian gently told the weary girl to move aside and get some rest. Watching her fade into the dark forest, the young mage sighed heavily, feeling exhausted. Turning his attention back to the prisoner, Ian approached the tied-up blonde female knight and slowly dismissed her current embarrassment. Surprised by his gentle attitude, the prisoner asked about his religious devotion to the church's sacred laws on gender-based clothing. Ian shrugged casually, completely surprising her when he revealed that he was actually a believer. Confused by his lack of judgment, the blonde woman asked how a true believer could accept her wearing men's clothes. Ian calmly explained that cross-dressing was very common where he came from, leaving her completely stunned by his strange logic. The bizarre image of a big guy cosplaying in a dress left both the prisoner and the mage in awkward silence. Ian reassured the panicked female knight, saying that being caught in men's armor wasn't such a tragedy that she had to be desperate. Despite his words of comfort, the tied-up female mercenary still bowed her head in mournful silence, reflecting on her failure. Under the shimmering night sky, the blonde female knight remarked that the young mage was truly bizarre despite possessing incredible magical power. She demanded to be treated according to her status as a knight, asking to be untied, but Ian flatly refused because he didn't trust her. Angry at being refused, the prisoner desperately swore on her sacred knightly honor that she would never attack them. Unswayed by her emotions, Ian pointed out that she hadn't even bothered to reveal her real name yet. When the mage remained suspicious of her sincerity, the prisoner suddenly interrupted by offering her name. Completely surprised, Ian looked back in astonishment at the unexpected breakthrough. With intense pride, she proudly declared herself Barenka of the noble Metz family, subtly implying a destiny far greater than a common mercenary. Balenka's hometown is Wentz County, a poverty-stricken region in the eastern part of the Roland Empire. As the eldest daughter, she was trained as an heir from a young age, but when her father passed away, her mother let her younger brother take that position instead. Balenka once donned armor and charged into battle to reclaim the status that was rightfully hers, but she lost the decisive trial and was exiled from her family. Ian wondered that if she had been convicted, she should have been in prison. So why was she wandering all the way out here? Balenka admitted that she had run away, leaving Ian speechless, so he continued by asking what would happen if she were caught again. She firmly asserted that she would never let herself be caught, because her goal was to head straight for the kingdom of Roland. Balenka's expression became visibly serious when she mentioned her future plans. Ian seemed slightly surprised when he heard the name Roland. That was where her father had served as a knight in his youth, a glorious time in shining silver armor. She believed that if she arrived there as his daughter, they would certainly welcome her. Ian nodded, looking as if he understood the whole story. But deep down, he silently judged this line of thinking to be a bit naive. Valenka fell into thought, her eyes showing a fleeting sense of sorrow as she thought about the past. Ian followed up with a harsh question about why she had to disguise herself as a man, which made Valenka blush beet red with embarrassment. He even added, "Or, do you like women?" causing Valenka to shout and deny it immediately. She explained that this empire was heavily biased against female knights. Not to mention that her father had warned her to be careful, because those people were all barbarians. Ian could only sigh and listen. Valenka intended to reveal another interesting secret. She pointed to the armor and helmet lying on the ground, saying they had been enchanted with special magic. Just by putting on that helmet, her voice would turn into a man's voice. Ian heard this and curiously asked how long she had had. Valenka said it was an heirloom, which had belonged to her father since a long, long time ago. Ian stepped closer to the campfire, intently observing the old set of equipment. He offered to examine the helmet a little, and she agreed immediately. Ian picked up the helmet to carefully examine the details inside. The mystery system suddenly displayed a notification about an inexplicable mystery. Ian held the helmet in his hands, his face full of thought at what the system was showing. A blue light from the system began to cover his vision. The notification appeared, stating that he did not yet meet the requirements to learn this skill at this time. Ian wondered if this was a completely different form of mystery than what he had known before. The light from the system became increasingly brilliant and engulfed the space. Finally, an achievement completion notification appeared, earning Ian an additional 50 bonus skill points. The total accumulated points had now reached 550, and Ian smiled slightly, satisfied with this result. He began to scroll through the list of new skills recently unlocked by the system. Ian's eyes lit up with a strange glimmer when he discovered something extremely interesting. It was the mediumship skill, which allowed the user to communicate with the deceased. Ian panicked, not expecting the mystery he had just witnessed to contain something so terrifying. He whispered Valenka's name in a very serious tone. The blonde girl turned back in confusion, not understanding what had made him change his attitude so quickly. Ian turned to look at the helmet again to confirm what he had just sensed. It turned out that this helmet was strangely haunted by the soul of Valenka's late father. Dawn broke, and the warm rays of sunlight began to filter through each leaf in the quiet forest. The group gathered around the campfire to enjoy a meager but cozy breakfast after a night full of turmoil. The atmosphere suddenly became suffocating when Talion and Valenka kept glaring at each other, making Ian, who was sitting in the middle, break out in a cold sweat. Ian tried to focus on his bowl of soup, hoping a new battle wouldn't break out right now. Valenka held the helmet in her hands, her face full of worry as she asked Ian if using it would cause any danger. Ian admitted he wasn't sure, as he wasn't a professional spirit medium mage. He advised her to try using it little by little in combat to see how effective it was, and Valenka nodded in agreement. The clinking sound of spoons hitting bowls was the only thing that broke the silence afterward. Talion was not yet fully convinced. She asked Ian if it was really okay to untie someone who used to be an enemy. Talion's eyes still held a hint of suspicion and harshness when looking at the female knight. She believed that Valenka's oaths of not harming anyone might just be empty words used to deceive them. Ian scratched his head in confusion. He had some hesitations but still wanted to trust his intuition. Valenka suddenly spoke up, calling Talion's and the mage Ian's names to attract their attention. She frankly admitted that even though it was due to a mission, the fact that they had once pointed swords at each other was an undeniable truth. But she also deeply remembered that Ian hadn't killed her, but instead had saved her life during a time of peril. Looking up at the deep blue sky, Valenka felt that making this request now was a bit selfish. She hesitated, asking if both of them could just pretend that the previous troubles had never happened. Ian looked straight into her eyes and said that if she wanted to make peace, just say it directly instead of beating around the bush like that. He affirmed that he didn't mind at all, while Talion still crossed her arms and looked away. Valenka declared that no matter what Talion thought, she would continue to fight with the honor of a true knight. Talion squinted, observing her. She began to realize that this girl seemed to have a special interest in Ian. Thoughts in Talion's head continued to revolve around this newly formed relationship. She secretly told herself that perhaps Valenka would eventually become a reliable ally for their group. Talion blushed slightly and apologized for her careless words the day before. Belinka didn't hold a grudge either. She nodded, accepting the apology from Talion. Ian breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the tense atmosphere suddenly dissipate unexpectedly. Seeing the two girls starting to get along, Ian felt that everything was unfolding in a better direction than expected. Belinka stood up and bowed to thank them for their tolerant decision toward her. She emphasized that she must repay Ian's life-saving grace at any cost. Ian was a bit surprised, wondering what method this knight intended to use to repay him. Belinka declared she would use her body to repay the debt, making Ian almost choke as he asked back in a panic. She knelt on one knee with a very serious expression right in front of the mage. Ian was still in a state of severe shock from the highly misleading offer just now. Belinka quickly clarified that she meant her sword would belong to him until the debt was fully paid. In the middle of the empty forest, the female knight officially performed the oath of loyalty to Ian. Ian looked at her, confused, while Talion, standing nearby, was also a bit startled by this scene. Belinka asked if Ian really understood himself and the role of a mage. She firmly asserted that he was a mage, and therefore she would be the one to protect him. Ian was still a bit dazed, but Belinka emphasized that she would accompany him wherever he went. Belinka asked if Ian knew what his next goal was, and Ian could only murmur in thought for a moment. Belinka's determined gaze made Ian feel a new weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. In Ian's mind, the image of how easily a mage could be eliminated by an assassin surfaced, and he realized that having a knight to protect him was the best thing right now. Memories of the fierce battle just past were still there. The harsh sound of clashing metal still echoed in Ian's mind. He realized that with a mighty knight like Belinka by his side for protection, the dangerous journeys ahead would become much less frightening. Ian smiled gently and called her name in a friendly manner, officially erasing the last distance between them. Belinka looked up at him, her deep blue eyes reflecting a new trust and a readiness to dedicate herself to her new companion. Under the windy blue sky, Ian reached out his hand as an official acceptance, affirming that from now on he would completely trust and rely on her strength. The next morning, Ian sent his raven, Oberon, to search for the soldiers scattered throughout the forest. He stood quietly, watching his familiar disappear into the mist. Oberon glided in the sky, finding where the group of soldiers was hiding. A soldier noticed the mage's signal, but the person next to him didn't seem very interested. They began to argue fiercely about whether or not to regroup. The fear of being cursed by the mage made one of the men in the group tremble with terror. Finally, about 300 remnants had gathered in full according to the instructions. A soldier gasped in astonishment when he saw the familiar silhouette in front of him. The Black Knight removed her helmet, revealing the golden hair of a beautiful girl. Belinka calmly introduced herself as someone from the Wince region, leaving everyone stunned. The men around still couldn't believe their eyes, their mouths wide open and eyes bulging. They roared in anger, arguing that a woman could not possibly be the legendary Black Knight. Seeing her honor insulted, Belinka drew her sword and issued a direct challenge. The arrogant soldier agreed immediately, wanted to take this opportunity to prove his strength. But in the blink of an eye, he was lying on the ground under the sharp edge of her blade. He lay dazed, completely shocked because he didn't understand what had just happened. The rest began to cry, realizing this was indeed the real Black Knight. Everything was resolved more smoothly and quickly than Ian had expected. Ian secretly thought that Belinka also knew how to use her reputation to keep those soldiers in line. In the meantime, Baron Decade approached with his usual stern demeanor. Ian hurried over to greet the old Baron. Both were relieved to see the other safe and sound after the chaotic battle. Lady Lucy also appeared, her expression much more relieved when seeing allies. Ian looked stern, reporting that there was important news he needed to announce immediately. Decade bowed sadly. He already knew about the passing of the beloved Count. The group stood in the middle of the forest, silently discussing the next steps. Decade was eager to defeat Graham, but their current force was too thin. He turned his gaze toward Lucy, waiting for a final command. Ian observed everyone's expressions, feeling the weight of this choice. If they backed down now, They would lose all honor and the chance for revenge. The only person qualified to make the decision to counterattack at this moment was none other than Lady Lucy. She stood there, her hands tightly intertwined, with hesitation clearly visible on her face. Decade knelt down, expressing his absolute loyalty to her. Lucy was startled to see the old Baron kneeling at her feet like that. He asserted that the army still had the strength to fight and was ready to charge into battle at her command. She looked at Ian, seemingly seeking advice or support. Ian smiled slightly, whispering for her to be brave and do as she desired. Deep down, Lucy was still struggling violently with extreme fear. The painful image of her parents' deaths appeared vividly in her mind. The enemy was still out there, swaggering with an arrogant, challenging smile. Lucy's eyes reddened. The pain had now transformed into an intense with a counterattack. "I want to drive Graham out and reclaim my territory," Lucy loudly declared her iron will to the entire army. Decade looked at the young lady with eyes full of pride, while Ian stood quietly behind, observing the situation. "The Baron has ordered us to fight," Decade shouted the rallying cry, stirring the iron spirit of the remaining soldiers. The army, filled with fighting spirit, began to prepare for the upcoming counterattack under the silent supervision of Lucy. Decade walked closer to Ian with a look of respect. It seemed he had completely trusted him. The old Baron urgently wanted to borrow Ian's magical power in the upcoming life-or-death confrontation. Ian nodded immediately in agreement, as he was actually having the same thought. Needless to say, Decade was overjoyed to receive the precious nod from his young friend. He also didn't forget to apologize for the hostile attitude the knights had shown Ian previously. Ian just smiled it off because it was already in the past, making Decade move to tears. However, a few rebellious soldiers still wouldn't settle down. They shouted Decade's name to express their opposition. The ringleader loudly asserted that the army of knights could win on their own without needing a mage. His arrogant and delusional statement left Decade stunned with anger and disappointment. He believed that having to borrow magical power to win a battle was an insult to knightly honor. Ian maintained a calm attitude. His familiar Oberon perched on his shoulder as if observing the clowns in front of them. He coldly replied, if they weren't satisfied with this arrangement, it would be best to get lost and save him the trouble. That soldier paled because his pride had been pricked. He hadn't expected the young mage to dare to speak so firmly. Ian bluntly stated that the battlefield had no room for those who only knew how to run their mouths and worry about delusional politics. His eyes suddenly glowed with a powerful purple light, radiating a heavy magical pressure that engulfed the others. The soldiers began to break out in cold sweat, feeling an invisible threat weighing down on their shoulders. Trying to suppress his fear, the soldiers still tried to sneer, arguing that war was the private domain of armored knights. Those who followed him also joined in mocking, calling Ian an apprentice mage with contempt. Ian smirked, repeating the harsh truth. These prestigious knights couldn't even stop a single black knight. His sharp sarcasm left them speechless, their faces changing color with embarrassment. Their faces turned red with anger, their hands gripping their weapons, but they dared not do anything. Decade intended to step in to intervene, but Ian raised his hand to stop him, asserting he hadn't finished speaking yet. Immediately after, a massive magical vortex suddenly formed, covering a vast area of space. Ian stood in the eye of the storm, radiating an overwhelming aura that made everyone present tremble with terror. Even a seasoned warrior like Decade was overwhelmed by this horrific source of magical power. The arrogant soldiers from before were now so scared that they clung to each other, crying and begging miserably. Ian's cold gaze looked down at those kneeling at his feet as if looking at mere ants. He declared, the entire army would launch a total attack at sunset, and he would only accept those who truly had the guts to go along. Ian turned his back and walked away, leaving behind a silence so deafening it engulfed the forest. As the fiery red evening sun set, the army of iron horses began to depart, heading straight for Graham's territory. On the border battlefield, Valenka stood in her imposing black knight armor, riding alone to face the entire enemy army. Behind her, Ian watched in silence, preparing his next move. Seeing the familiar figure wreaking havoc, the enemy ranks began to stir. They couldn't believe the legendary Black Knight was now standing on their opponent's side. Baron Graham, also known as the red-haired Baron, froze for a few seconds. The soldier beside him frantically reported, confirming without a doubt that it was indeed Belenka. Graham gritted his teeth, veins bulging on his forehead. He couldn't fathom how Lucy, the daughter he had always looked down upon, could have convinced such a powerful warrior to betray him. The sound of horns echoed incessantly, signaling a full-scale assault. The already tense atmosphere felt like it was about to explode with every blast. The Baron's cavalry began to spur their horses forward like a cascading waterfall. The thunder of hooves shook the ground, and dust clouds obscured a corner of the sky. Looking at the charging army, Belenka didn't flinch. A powerful kick to her horse made the ground tremble beneath her. She drew her sword from its scabbard, a brilliant blue glow flashing menacingly from the slits of her iron visor. A single small motion was enough to reveal the killing intent of a master swordsman. Graham screamed orders for the entire army to charge. He wanted to crush everything in his path to extinguish this resistance immediately. The two sides clashed, the clatter of weapons resonating across the field. Sparks flew every time blades struck each other, marking the start of a bloody battle. A powerful horizontal sword strike tore through the air at dizzying speed. The strength behind each swing from the cavalry was no joke. The Baron's cavalryman smirked triumphantly as he struck, thinking he had taken down his target in an instant. But that smile vanished immediately. His eyes widened in terror as he saw his opponent move with unreasonable speed, dodging the blow as if it were nothing. Belenka countered. Her blue eyes glowed with killing intent behind her mask as she swung her sword with terrifying force. A wide sweeping strike from her sent the entire squad of enemies flying. Belenka stood alone in the encirclement, looking no different than a grim reaper harvesting souls. Witnessing his soldiers being taken down so easily, Baron Graham began to lose his temper. He clicked his tongue in frustration, unable to believe the situation had turned like this. The red-haired Baron felt anxious, sweat streaming down his forehead. He realized if this continued, his troops would be wiped out without achieving anything. High up on the hill, Lucy and Ian stood watching calmly. Their presence was like an arrogant challenge to the one holding power down below. Graham frowned, his eyes glinting with malice. A dark thought flashed through his mind to turn the tables. He figured that as long as he captured Lucy, everything would be over. He looked toward the horizon, where the sunset was being slowly swallowed by dark clouds. The Baron spurred his horse to charge straight up the hill, shouting orders to attack the main target. He wanted to end this with his own hands. Suddenly, mysterious dark purple energy appeared, swirling around Graham's body like tentacles of darkness. Graham shouted in a panic, having no clue what the hell was happening as the surrounding light simply faded away. That was when Ian made his move. With a cold expression, he reached out his hand, controlling the dark magic engulfing the battlefield. The grand spell Curtain of Darkness was activated. Glowing magic circles appeared amidst the artificial night, swallowing every glimmer of hope from the enemy. Graham's soldiers fell into a state of extreme panic. In total darkness, they screamed for help, urging each other to do something to escape the situation. The battlefield descended into chaos. The sounds of clashing and screaming echoed through the thick, black mist. No one could see their enemies or allies anymore. Graham frantically yelled at his soldiers not to retreat, but every effort was futile against the fear the magic was sowing. He tried to reassure the soldiers who were fleeing for their lives, but even he was breaking out in a cold sweat, having never expected Ian's power to be this overwhelming. Looking from Graham's perspective, his once mighty army were now just faint, dark shadows running around like headless chickens. The Baron stood stunned amidst the wreckage, muttering and asking what was happening. His authority had completely collapsed after a single spell. Suddenly, a cold blade was pressed right against his throat. The icy sensation of steel made Graham freeze, cold sweat running down his cheek. The one who had captured him was none other than Belenka. She appeared like a ghost in the night, completely controlling the enemy leader. Graham gritted his teeth in humiliation, his eyes filled with resentment, but he couldn't do anything against the opponent's blade. The battle was effectively over. The bloodstained sword was thrust straight into the ground like a marker of the rebellion's defeat. Other cavalrymen also gradually dropped their weapons and surrendered. Belenka looked off into the distance, her face hidden behind the iron mask, showing no emotion after having just performed such a great feat. On the hill, Ian still stood there, the raven Oberon perched on his shoulder like a loyal companion. He looked at the devastated battlefield with a somber gaze. The sunset shone on the young mage's face. He didn't look like someone who had just wiped out an entire army, but like someone who had just finished a routine job. Lucy stepped up beside Ian, her voice trembling with emotion. She looked into his eyes as if seeking confirmation of this unbelievable reality. Lady Lucy's golden eyes welled with tears. She choked out, We actually won." All the frustration and suppression she'd bottled up for so long felt like it was finally released. Ian offered a rare smile, nodding gently at her. He knew that this was only the beginning of a long and arduous journey ahead. He took her hand and offered his sincere congratulations to Lady Tyrion. This first victory was the crucial stepping stone for Lucy to reclaim everything that belonged to her. After the battle, Lucy's soldiers began clearing the field. One soldier collapsed on the ground, while his comrades were busy tallying the spoils of war. A cavalryman picked up a shiny sword, marveling at its beauty. The blade was intricately inlaid with silver, an extremely valuable item on the black market. Cheers of victory echoed across the field. The soldiers raised their weapons, proud to have defeated the red-haired Baron's army. Ian stood silently, observing their joy. In the flow of Ian's thoughts, irony was evident. He realized that, after all, people fight and kill each other simply for frivolous materials, like expensive jewelry or silver-inlaid weapons. Images of knights clashing frantically just to gain advantages appeared in his mind. To them, living meant seizing as many precious things as possible. The contrast between the ideals of battle and the brutal reality of war left Ian deep in thought. Lives were lost, all to satisfy the bottomless greed of humanity. A drop of blood fell into the still water, creating deep red ripples. That was the price paid for selfish ambitions, burning everything down just to satisfy a temporary desire. Ian looked at the soldiers, showing off the necklaces and bracelets they had just looted. He wondered why medieval people so easily traded their lives for such flashy things. Ian stood still, his eyes filled with sadness as he looked into the distance. He felt tired of the nature of humanity in this world. He suddenly thought, perhaps learning necromancy was a mistake. He came here to find the mysteries of death, but he couldn't seem to grasp any clues from these meaningless massacres. In a humorous moment of imagination, Ian saw himself as someone who just specialized in cleaning up corpses after every fight, no different from an executioner or a crime scene cleaner. Or maybe he should try lying in a coffin to see. He questioned himself about his strange method of magic training, hoping to find a breakthrough from the craziest ideas. Saying is doing, so Ian tried lying in a stone coffin next to a skeleton. He closed his eyes, trying to feel the flow of death energy to improve his necromancy skills. But immediately, Lucy appeared and looked at him with a horrified expression. She shouted, asking if he was crazy for doing this weird stuff. Ian just smiled. His master would surely say the exact same thing. Ian looked up at the clear blue sky, where sunlight was filtering through the leaves. A rare silence following the firestorm of battle. The sound of a crow echoed in the high sky. Oberon was also enjoying the peaceful atmosphere, indifferent to the turmoil below the ground. Ian stood up, dusting off his cloak. He wondered what it ultimately meant to be a mage, when he seemed to only be chasing after troubles instead of truly training. So far, all the power he had gained seemed to come from accidentally stumbling upon magical mysteries. He wondered if this training method was truly effective in the long run. Ian clenched his fist, and red magic circles appeared. Perhaps he needed to force himself to train even harder to deal with powerful enemies in the future. Beneath his feet, mystical black energy swirled. He himself didn't yet truly understand the full extent of his potential. Everything remained a big unknown to the young mage himself. The raven Oberon suddenly swooped down, pecking gently at Ian's ear as if to remind him of something. It seemed this little assistant didn't want his master to get too lost in his thoughts. Ian started, turning back to squint at Oberon. This raven was sometimes sharper than a human, always knowing how to pull him back to reality. "Right?" he muttered. Ian smiled slightly, looking at Oberon perched on his hand. He realized he still had a very long road ahead to truly master this dark power. He turned to look at Lucy, who was approaching. It was time to deal with the post-war tasks and prepare for the next plans for the Terrian territory. Lucy, in a gorgeous white dress, walked radiantly toward Ian. She looked like a savior amidst the ruins of the battlefield, full of life and hope. She asked Ian if everything was settled. Ian nodded, confirming he had finished taking inventory of the assets recovered from the enemy. "Very good," Lucy smiled, satisfied. Suddenly, Lucy looked around and asked where Knight Decade was. She said she hadn't seen him for a while. Ian replied that he was busy talking to the knights over there. In the distance, Decade was gathering the remaining knights. It seemed they were discussing their departure now that their duty to defend the border was complete. An unavoidable farewell. Knight Decade, with his signature thick beard, smiled slightly. He looked at his comrades, his eyes filled with respect for those who had fought by his side. Ian watched that conversation in silence. He knew Decade was a man of integrity, and his departure would be a significant loss for Lucy's army in the future. A while later, the victory celebration at Barony Castle finally came to an end. The people and soldiers began to disperse, leaving a quiet atmosphere behind. That was also when Knight Decade and his cavalry officially left the territory. They mounted their horses, preparing for a new, more distant journey. Decade rode at the head of the troops, looking forward with determination. He had fulfilled his promise to protect Lucy until she reclaimed this border territory. He suddenly stopped, turning his head to look at Ian one last time. Perhaps Decade still had some lingering attachment or wanted to say something to the young mage who had turned the tide of the battle. Ian stood under a large tree, waving goodbye to Decade. Between these two men was now a silent understanding and respect that needed no words. The powerful farewell handshake between Decade and Ian happened in a flash. Decade hoped that their paths would cross again in the future. Ian nodded in agreement. Ian watched the soldiers' figures fade into the distance. He knew Decade was leaving to find his own ideals, just like he was searching for the nature of magic. "Thank you, Decade," he whispered. Meanwhile, in the central square, medieval justice was being carried out. Baron Graham was taken to the public guillotine before the eyes and cheers of the outraged crowd. The price for betrayal was death. Lucy sat on a high platform, observing, and breathed a sigh of relief now that the enemy had been removed. Becoming famous and supported by the people made her feel a bit tired, but also filled with pride. However, Lucy didn't forget to tease Ian. She said that while everyone was cheering for her, he didn't have a single fan. Ian just stayed silent, accepting that he was feared by the crowd. "Nobody even cares to call your name," she said with a witty laugh. Ian scratched his head, feeling a bit annoyed by Lucy's teasing. He knew all too well how the rumors about him being cursed had made the people distance themselves from him. "Nobody is going to cheer for a mage rumored to curse others," he muttered. Lucy suddenly remembered something and reminded Ian that they needed to set off soon for their next journey. Everything here was temporarily settled, but the vast world out there still had many things waiting for them to explore. Ian asked Lucy in confusion where they were going, while she was eagerly bragging about a secret gift she had promised to give him. The festive atmosphere still lingered with colorful pennants hanging high above. Ian's face revealed clear surprise, mixed with curiosity as he heard Lucy mention the gift. He wondered what kind of mischief this cheeky girl was plotting again. A gift, really? He thought to himself. They stepped into an old, ancient room, where a large stone coffin sat amidst flickering torches. On the lid of the coffin was a crude, heavy stone block, radiating an invisible pressure that engulfed the space. Ian stared at the strange stone, feeling a surge of powerful magic emanating from within. He exclaimed in awe, "Is this a magic sword?" A new chapter full of mystery and power seemed to be opening for the young mage.